everybody. Oh, testing 1, 2, 3. There we are. We are live back on a Tuesday night, and we finally made it here. We finally went and saw the big movie of the summer, Spider-Man Brand New Day. We got the ticket. We saw it with the friend group here. We can finally give the official review, and we may have to calibrate for a second as well too, because I'm not gonna lie, we are in a bit of a feisty mood here to start this one. It is what it is. Just a couple of things going on leading into this, and then right when I sat down, I was like, okay, here we go, finally. And then bam, we spilled the drink, and it was like, oh, the last straw there that ever happened. And it did have me thinking about, like, did Ebert ever have a day when he was just like, oh, I guess, not to compare ourselves to the great Robert Ebert, but Robert Ebert, hey, yo, Roger Ebert, sorry to the legend, rest in peace, Roger Ebert, hey, yo, I guess there might, the odds are in the extended Ebert family, there may be a Robert Ebert, Bob Ebert, but obviously the movie critic, the great movie critic himself, Roger Ebert. Did he ever have a day where he was just like, oh, I had the worst night's sleep ever, and then a couple of interactions that didn't go well, and then right before he sat down to write the review, he just like spilled his coffee all over his papers, and he's like, oh no, The Godfather Part 2, 2.5 stars, 3 stars. Hey, and it's like, Ebert, what happened? It's like, oh, we didn't know that Ebert like spilled his coffee beforehand and was like in a bad mood. So you just never know. So it's like, hey, I think maybe it will prove the strength of the Spider-Man movie, getting to talk about the impressive theatrical experience that it was, trying to find maybe the correct term there to obviously pinpoint it, but a lot to get to discussing this new Marvel movie. And hey, I guess we don't even really have time for a sports corner as well too. There's so much we have to talk about right now. I mean, with training camp starting up, and right now as well too, there's the maybe a little outside our wheelhouse right now, but the World Series of Poker final is on in the background, and I mean, poker is one of those sports. It was like if it was like sneakily like, what sports would you want to be really, really good at? I mean, poker would be a fun one, sport, hey, yo. But I did see they were cutting into some of the highlight packages at one point, and they showed maybe one of the former champions, and I think he maybe had a belt. So I don't know. Do you win a belt for the World Series? Do you win a belt for let's see, for poker World Series? Let's see what the answer is here. No, okay, you do not win a belt. You receive a prestigious gold bracelet rather than a belt. So I guess whatever he had there, maybe it was just like a custom belt that somebody made for him or something. I don't know. They were interviewing somebody. I guess we have it on the mute right now. I was about to rage, chat. I was like, the two people that can't have belts in, the sporting world. It can't be like the fighting champions and then the poker champions. Like, we may have to, like, a bracelet seems appropriate. Hey, yo, shout out. Like, it still is, good jewelry. It is bigger than a ring, though. So, obviously this does correlate a little bit. Shout out to, of course, Bill Simmons. This does correlate. He has had the theory in the past of like the MVP trophy should correlate to like how impressive your MVP season is. So, it's like if you have like I guess a bad MVP season, it's like, oh, you get a little MVP trophy. It's like, wait, what happened to my MVP season? My MVP trophy is really small. Like, hey, yo. But, like Russell Westbrook, whip out your MVP trophy. And he's like, I don't want to. It's embarrassing. But, again, I guess a bracelet is technically a little bit bigger than a ring, like a championship ring is basketball and football and those things. But I guess they do also have the team trophy as well, too, that goes with that. But as the individual, maybe they need to get a bigger piece of jewelry, than a bracelet, like a necklace or something. And was it maybe there was like a Chiefs, there was what was it, one of the Chiefs years or something? I feel like one of the, I don't even remember if it was NFL or NBA, but there was a championship ring that I feel like they did have it with a chain that you could put the ring on a chain and use the ring as a pendant, or either you could take, like, they had like the face of the ring, because obviously the Super Bowl rings and the NBA rings and stuff are pretty big now at this point as well too. Ayo, but you could like take the top of the ring off and then maybe mount the ring on a chain as a pendant that way, if I remember. But they had it rigged up some way where you could wear it a couple different ways as well too. Because again, it's not maybe like the most functional ring to wear out and around, but if you throw it on a pendant, that actually is pretty cool as well. But hey, yo, chat, we were about to really rage into the poker guys as well. We are like, they have to give up the belt. It can't be the heavyweight champion and then the World Series of Poker, like raising their belts, like, yeah, the sporting champion of the world. Hey, yeah, and I guess the belt is cool, obviously. Like, just again, maybe that's what is cool about it is if you're holding up a championship, trophy that looks like a fighting championship trophy, you're like channeling the energy of a fighter, maybe in some ways as well too. I don't know, but yeah, I think the bracelet is good. So shout out to the World Series of Poker for the bracelet. And of course, we've been on a little bit of a kick for this game called Goat Lab as well too, where we try to build the perfect NBA player. We're an NBA nerd, Chad. It is what it is. So this game's perfect for us. Oh, Chad, hey, yo, look, it's such an epic mode. I can't even speak about it. It turns out they added a career mode into Goat Lab here as well too. So it's like, oh man, am I gonna start a career? Hey, yo, I didn't think I was into video games. Like, I put the video games away, Chad. I'm trying not to get distracted over here, but I'm gonna end up having a career on Goat Lab, starting a perfect player. Hey, yo, I just like, do we have to build the perfect player, Chad? I don't even know. We have to talk about Spider-Man. I guess it is what it is. But it's not. It is what it is. It's a great movie, and it was a great time to go see at the theater as well too. Obviously, there was a lot of expectations riding on this movie, just for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well too. But I mean, like we said time and time again, just going even to the movies back, obviously a couple weeks ago when they had the Comic-Con, or I guess maybe literally just now a couple weeks ago, but fairly recently they had the Comic-Con. We're dropping the slate. Not a ton of movies were on that slate, but the movies that we were looking at, they're pretty surefire movies, just in terms of they're gonna be pretty big box office movies, and hopefully there is a certain level of success that those movies would get. Obviously, Spider-Man, two Avengers, and then Black Panther. Coogler handling Black Panther. You assume that's going to be a very, very good movie as well. And then the Avengers, maybe you have your nervousness about it, but again, it's like, okay, there is just maybe a baseline entertainment that you're going to get there, having just an Avengers movie as well too. But Spider-Man, chat, hey, yo, it really does work. And I've never been the biggest Spider-Man guy, and I'm not, I don't think I walked out of the theater, being like, Spider-Man's now my favorite superhero of all the superheroes. Like, I don't know if my superheroes ranking necessarily changed. And hey, yo, I don't know if even Peter Parker is my favorite version of Spider-Man, but I cannot, you cannot obviously lie about just the cinematic value that superhero has, because time and time again, it has provided as well too. And maybe there is a little bit of competitiveness. I'm the Batman fan over here, so it's like, okay, obviously, maybe Batman and Superman get more pitted against each other, DC or whatever. But I think Batman versus Spider-Man is the sneaky rivalry there for the all-time comic books, even just for, not even just worried about the cinematic universes as well too. I'm not the comic guy. I could be wrong, but especially for the comic movie crossover as well too, those are the two characters, and Superman as well a little bit too. But those are the two characters obviously that you can just recast time and time again and redo. And they do hit a little bit of a different audience. Maybe Batman's obviously with Matt Reeves is a little bit of a different tone as well too. But this was definitely like a lot of obviously the reviewers were saying as well too after the movie, the maturity of this movie was definitely there as well. And you got to give, I think all of the Spider-Man movies in some ways have definitely had that in their in their in their franchises. And really it is what it is. Obviously, we'll get into it when we get into the movie as well too. But the Tom Holland Zendaya stuff in this movie, the Spider-Man relationship stuff just at every level with with his friends, with his obviously his aunt and uncle, his parent figures in his story, just the relationships that he develops over the course of his life in just the friendly neighborhood way. And I guess in some ways with the superheroes as well too, like in the MCU version. Again, I don't know how this correlates to the comics, where Spider-Man with a mentor figure, the way he had Robert Downey Jr., the way he had Iron Man in the MCU. But the relationship that he was developing there as well too is one of the strongest in the film universe that we had. So it just, time and time again, it really does work. And even though this movie, I mean, you see the runtime, obviously, I mean, everybody has seen it as well too, if you look at the box office numbers, but 2.5 hours long, and it does get a little bit bogged down in the superhero stuff for sure. I mean, that's, a little undeniable, but the real like story, the personal storytelling in this movie is, a real high point in the MCU, and the journeys with the characters here that they've been able to take them on has been really great as well too. And I think obviously Tom Holland and Zendaya and just the cast of this movie are going to be just the big winners of the movie right away. But the director of this movie, who we obviously we love Shang-Chi when it first dropped, but we still love it as well too. But I'm just hey, we were in day one here for Shang-Chi. So, and, I don't know what the Rotten Tomatoes was. I think it was a great, 92% for, was that the critic score? I think the audience score is pretty high though for Shang-Chi as well too. Again, this was a beloved movie as well. What do we got? 98 on the popcorn meter as well. Shang-Chi underrated in the reviews, chat. Again, underrated, I think, in terms of how people talk about it now as well. But that's 2 for 2 with our guy, Destin Daniel Cretton, going with the 90/90s for the Rotten Tomatoes, really delivering for a couple characters. And, again, the MCU, obviously, they have a lot of expectations. They have a lot of things that they have to accomplish with these movies from a storytelling standpoint and, just translating the characters on screen. But the behind the scenes stuff as well, too, is just as important for Marvel as the on the screen stuff, and having the creatives there, of course, that can really, tell these stories. And, this is 2 different movies with 2 different characters now that this director has had the opportunity to develop with. And, they already had him in line to do like an Avengers type movie as well. So it's not necessarily like, he is like way up on the list clearly for Marvel, for future leading the Marvel Cinematic Universe type creators. But I think this movie really does solidify him as that next guy after the Russo brothers. And, obviously, again, we'll see, I guess with Doomsday, I mean, how good Doomsday is. And, again, I don't know if the Russo brothers are just locked in to do Avengers movies every time. But the Avengers movies themselves, I think, are going to change going forward. As I guess I don't even know what the team up movies are going to look like going forward as well too. Obviously, the Avengers are the big on-screen movie team, but the big team in the comics is the X-Men. So is it like, if the X-Men are in Avengers movie, is the Avengers still the title for the big crossovers? How does that obviously work? And, the Russo brothers just direct those movies for the rest of their lives, at this point, because again, they obviously are really good at it. And like I've said before, I love them directing movies, so I'm not trying to replace them from the universe, but if they are stepping away from it, or, if they just need other creatives to handle these big movies as well, too, again, if they are having like big X-Men crossover type movies, like maybe Destin Daniel Cretton is the X-Men guy now going forward, and maybe he can handle those types of crossovers. But I just but the point is, I think there's a bigger role for him in Marvel to be handling these crossover type stuff, because if you're looking at how the Russo brothers had their path in Marvel specifically, of course they started with the character movie in Captain America Winter Soldier, and they just had a great action movie as well too. So their just ability to obviously direct in that genre is really great. Again, Shang-Chi is very much like that as well. It's a great superhero movie. It's a great martial arts movie. Obviously it checks a lot of boxes there. But it is a little bit more of a solo story. You have, I don't even know what Ben Kingsley's, I guess he's the Mandalorian, but I don't know what like Trevor Slattery, is that his name? I guess he's like the one Marvel guy that crosses over into Shang-Chi. But again, it's very much contained to Shang-Chi. This is a little bit more, not Civil War necessarily. Like Civil War, of course, is a pseudo Avengers movie for a Captain America movie. Like you really do have all the Avengers in that movie for sure. And you do have the introduction of Spider-Man in that movie. But, again, that goes to where the similarities are for this Spider-Man movie as well too. Again, maybe not the same level of the amount of Avengers in the movie, but he did have to handle another character, in Spider-Man. So again, maybe, and the Hulk as well too, he was in this movie, but also the character introduction, the way that Spider-Man was introduced in a Russo brothers movie in Civil War, of course, and should we have said spoiler alert at the beginning? Hey, spoiler alert for Spider-Man. Have we said too much spoiler stuff? But again, we're reviewing this after a weekend where it's making $1 billion at the box office. So if there's one movie we like don't have to say spoiler for it, like it's kind of this one. It's like Titanic and Spider-Man Brand New Day. Hey, yo. But, and I guess, also Avengers Endgame maybe as well too. But Either way, I guess spoiler warning, spoiler alert for Spider-Man Brand New Day, just in case for some reason you haven't seen it yet and you don't want it spoiled. Hey yo, but forever, what we were saying is, of course, the spoiler alert being the character introduction, I guess, of Jean Grey in some ways, but again, very very similar to the way that you have to introduce Spider-Man and just bring in a new character there in the MCU. And he maybe even had to handle a little bit more of origin story as well too for Jean Grey. I mean, when they introduced Spider-Man in the MCU, of course, we didn't even get the true Spider-Man origin story until this very last movie, in terms of obviously him losing the parent figure, or obviously the movie before, in terms of him losing the parent figure, and then that kind of trans that kind of being the moment, stepping stone moment for him, kind of obviously the great power becomes great responsibility type moment. But again, they did invert his character story a little bit, and what that did was it made it a little bit more seamless to introduce him into Civil War, because again, you bring him in powered up already, and it still worked out great, obviously, because he still is able to take the character hero's journey in a sense, even though if we don't technically get to see him have the spider bite. But again, you get to bring him into Civil War a little bit more powered up, to recruit the heroes for this fight. RDJ is like scouting AAU like he's like Phil Knight at Nike. He's like, okay, who's out here on the AAU circuit putting up 30 points, who's brought Zion Williamson in the AAU circuit. I guess, like, the early Spider-Man clips are like Ball is Life YouTube, where RDJ just like late at night, just his algorithms just like, oh, what's this Ball is Life video of this kid swinging around on on these skyscrapers in New York, I guess. And then he obviously sees Tom Holland. He recruits into the team, locks him up to a shoe deal early, and then by the second Spider-Man, he's decked out in Stark gear. It's all Stark gear at that point. He doesn't even wear other superhero gear. He's like only Stark gear. I think, does he get maybe he like wins a gold medal in, I guess, Fantastic Four tech at some point. They just like cover it up like Jordan did at the Olympics. I don't know. But again, obviously RDJ locked in. Rest in peace to Iron Man. But definitely would have been a great recruiter as well. I don't know, coach necessarily, but I think the Avengers, there would have been pieces of the team they would have been able to do. I think Captain America is the easy coach call because of like he's got like a little bit of like a Phil Jackson vibe, kind of the Zen master. But obviously Phil Jackson had Tex Winter with him. Phil Jackson was great with the X's and O's. So I don't know, would Captain America be good with X's and O's? I guess I'm thinking basketball as well too. Obviously AAU kind of implies basketball. I don't think that football AAU, that terminology is necessarily used as much. But obviously football could still apply here. But I'm thinking basketball. But I don't know if Captain America would have the X's and O's with basketball. It would be interesting. I mean, it would have been around in the 40s. It would have been around. Obviously, so would have football as well too. I don't know if they baseball would have obviously been the most popular. So Captain America definitely would have played baseball for sure. And there is definitely some obviously just the recruiting cycle is kind of the same for all of them in some ways at this point. But so, you could see, I think the Avengers could move kind of seamlessly into all the sports as well too. I mean, they could even be boxing. Like RDJ is like recruiting and promoting boxing, and then somebody else is like handling the coaching and stuff as well too. Like they could be in all the sports. But I think RDJ as like a G, maybe like a Sam Presti type as well too. Again, I guess maybe obviously when you don't really have to deal with like the Sokovia Accords as well too. Maybe that's like the CBA. I don't know. It is like RDJ when but I guess as like a GM, you don't really have to worry about the CBA. That's owners and players as well too. So I think maybe the NBA, like again, maybe some of RDJ's like Tony Stark's tendencies there. Maybe they don't hurt the team as much. He can just use his recruiting skills. He'd be like, oh man, where'd you find this Spider-Man guy? But, and then, obviously Captain America, that's where we need him to be the coach, because his recruiting skills are like, oh, let's go get Ant-Man. And Ant-Man, Ant-Man's sneaky powerful. Again, I think in the greater course of the Avengers, when they're all working together, and then you're like, oh, we need to throw Ant-Man into this situation, and then, size him down, get him into this little, spot to like, get like a, hey, what are we saying? But, it's like usually like a techie situation. Get in there, unplug some wires, and then, or like slip under a door or something like that. Hey, usually not as vile as you guys are thinking. Hey, it is what it is. But again, that was their big recruiting poll as well too. And some Avengers teams are more about player development and some are more about recruiting, I guess. But Spider-Man, I guess, was the early one. But the point is, Destin Daniel Cretton had to have the player introductions. It is what it is, or the superhero introduction. He had to handle that as well too. Marvel, and I guess maybe the greater piece of it, obviously the Spider-Man, again, entrusting him with the Spider-Man franchise, they're entrusting him with a lot of things there, but also, like we're saying, entrusting him with that as well too. Like, yeah, I guess maybe I didn't say it clearly there, but the Spider-Man franchise is, a big enough franchise that you would introduce another major character in that property, but to have him direct that movie, but then to also have that responsibility as well too. Again, just shows you the trust that Marvel does already have in him, and this goes to him being a bit, a good filmmaker outside of Marvel as well too. Not just restricting him to those types of movies, but again, it's clear that he has a passion to be in this space as well too. Like he is pursuing directing multiple of these projects, and again, he's very very good at them as well too. Like he's an average of 90% on the Rotten Tomatoes right now, and two very very successful you know theater experiences for us as well. Like personally, again, like as a non-comic watcher, and maybe I'm just being stubborn at this point to say that I just like Shang-Chi more as a superhero. But Spider-Man, again, there's so many more Spider-Man movies than there are Shang-Chi movies. So, just the connection from a movie standpoint that you would have to the Spider-Man franchise character, again, would be more, if I'm restricting myself to the movies, again, would be more than a Shang-Chi, just the one solo movie at this point. But still, it is a great solo movie. And it is, the skyscraper scene is great as well. There's just a lot of great stuff in there. So, it's a fun watch. But is again, maybe the one I'd most want to throw on overall, despite, again, I don't know how I'd want to, rank it there. Again, maybe I'm just being stubborn there by saying that. But, again, regardless, either way, he's been successful with both of them. So I think that, the point is, I think that he is kind of the sneaky big winner here. Maybe in the quote unquote long term, especially if Tom Holland's just going to retire in 2027, because I saw something about that as well, too. Where he's like, I'm just not going to be like, hey, at the peak of his powers, he just walking away. I guess we were comparing him to like Tom Cruise and Michael J. Fox and Mark Hamill. I guess we were scaling up there. We started with Mark Hamill, and then we ended at Tom Cruise. We're like, okay, maybe he'll be Tom Cruise at the end of the day by his career. Maybe Michael J. Fox is like somewhere in the middle. Like we said, I think there might be somewhere in between Michael J. Fox and and Tom Cruise, that maybe he falls in there, but maybe he has I forgot who even just said now as well too, but maybe he has that type of career as well. Hey, who was it, Chad? Somebody with Destin Daniel Cretton and I guess Spider-Man. Oh geez, I don't know, but it was, I guess it seemed good when we said it. Pause, I don't know. But regardless, I guess that could be a career possibility type. Was it Will Smith? I don't know. Hey, but shout out. Oh, I know who it's gonna be. I guess we didn't say it. But I know who we were going to say. Okay. Restarting. Obviously the comparisons that we said, but walking away at the peak of his powers, and this also does kind of work for maybe some with all due respect, some maybe not like the tall guy actors, but maybe there's some Al Pacino. Hey, yo. Like, I think that's even a different level than Tom Cruise as well, too. Like, I don't even think that that's necessarily a hot take to say that Al Pacino is on a different level than Tom Cruise as an actor. Like, again, as a, box office star. So maybe it's like a mesh of both. Like, Tom Holland's like a Al Pacino, Tom Cruise cross, I guess is our draft analogy. I don't know. But, Pacino did have a moment there where he kind of took a step away from acting as well, too. I don't know if he was as, in as good of a place as Tom Holland is. Off of Spider-Man, newly married. He's like, I've got nothing to do. I was like, I could just walk away from acting. I'm good. But, regardless, I guess there is that similar storyline potential there if Tom Holland does it. And he's just saying for 2027 as well, too. He could obviously just have stuff lined up for 2028. And the Spider-Man movie is going to have some legs, I'm sure. So I'm sure he's going to, the Spider-Man franchise, the star power there is not going to weaken too much. But, it is also, like we're saying, he's got a lot of sway right now. He's definitely, again, you never know how it does totally translate into the behind the scenes conversations, just because, it's like you're playing Spider-Man in a big box office role. Does that mean you just can demand anything you want in any room ever? Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but, again, like we're saying, he does have a lot. The resume is looking very good right now for Tom Holland with the star power of this movie, and then the Odyssey being a pretty good success as well too. And again, it's not like everybody's like, oh, Tom Holland's the weak part of the Odyssey. So it's like obviously he's delivering now as well too. But yeah, again, I think right away, obviously, like we're saying, our guy Destin Daniel Cretton is a major winner, and this movie's probably already made more than Shang-Chi as well too. Again, not to disrespect, we already were kind of underestimating the ratings. But in 2021, I guess COVID time as well too ish. So how's that impact? But yeah, I mean, and again, very successful as well too. Obviously, you love it. It made 432 million at the box office. But Spider-Man, again, it's a different level of superhero property. Going to be making about what do they say, 900, like we were saying, 900 to almost nearly $1 billion just in one weekend there. So like we're just his name value alone is clearly just tripling in almost one weekend alone. So, this is a great opportunity for him as a director as well too. And again, obviously with the Russo brothers now, we do have some other non-Marvel movies that they have directed, so we have a sense of what they can do. There is a style that they do have. Obviously, does the Gray Man have a similar feel to some stuff? But it is obviously an outside Marvel movie. It does have its own uniqueness as well too. I just would be interested to see what kind of projects he would pursue outside of Marvel. And, maybe I need to do a better job of going back and watching his, the problem is he doesn't have any movies from like 1970 on Tubi, our guy Destin Daniel Cretton. So if he did have that, then, the 70s, 80s on Tubi, then he'd be locked in for our rotation right now. But, we could do a good job of going through his filmography as well too, and checking up on the other non-Marvel movies. Just again, just see kind of what outside we would be looking at for him as a director as well too. But again, for this type of stuff, he is very, very locked in. And the other thing that the Russo brothers, of course, again, are very, very good at as well too, is just the greater fan service to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're the attention to detail in what has happened in the MCU. I guess what the MCU is telling them that is going to happen, but just with the comics, with the greater lore as well, is definitely there. And obviously, I guess for us, fortunately, we had a couple more comic knowledgeable people with us in the theater at the time, so afterwards they're able to kind of point out some things where it's like, oh, this scene here was a cover to that was kind of this moment in the video games. There was a lot of stuff that people were saying like this was taken out of the video games from the Spider-Man. But yeah, again, it's just him knowing the greater property and the greater the greater IP that has happened with him as well too. And just again, there are other details pointing to the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe as well. And again, to continue with the Russo brothers comp, I guess, because that's just for me the easy one to make. And again, I think it is for me a compliment to both of their filmmaking, both of their filmmaking talents as well too. Because again, like I'm saying, while maybe the Russo brothers get pinned down a little bit as the Marvel guys, like I do just like their movies in general. So to me, it's a credit to have the comparison there. But hey, shout out to the Russo brothers. But like we're saying, again, they did also have to take over a Captain America character after another creator got it started already as well too. So you have to make sure that, of course, you have, like we're saying, your own voice and your own sort of tone and your own sort of style to the movies as a creative. And obviously, not to say disrespectfully, to anybody that makes a movie before you, but the word improve, you're going to try to improve in any aspects that you can. And then again, add your own signature touches, pause as well too. But, again, you also have to match storylines. You have to match certain things that have happened with, the things that the other creatives have established in those previous movies as well. And you have to maintain some sort of cohesion there. So again, it makes sense as a character franchise. And the only time that we have seen like a really big pivot and it worked was Thor, kind of. And again, Thor: The Dark World, I think maybe like the filmmaking tone of those first two Thors is fine. Like there is kind of a a dark 2000, early 2010s sort of, just whatever that it kind of that 2010s digital CGI sort of look is. Again, it's definitely very digital, but it's iconic for there, and it looks it looks fine on a rewatch for me. But again, obviously the tone was a little bit more brighter, a little bit more comical, in the script as well too, in the Taika Waititi versions, even though maybe Love and Thunder wasn't necessarily the most well reviewed. But obviously what he was able to do, reestablishing just Thor as a character with Ragnarok. But that even shows you again what the Russo brothers were able to do with Thor. Like the Russo brothers have this entire new version of Thor that they have to deal with. That Taika Waititi has established, bring him into the Avengers and try to maintain that tone. They're able to do that, and again, like this movie feels still like the movie connected to the previous three Spider-Men that we got. Like again, obviously Destin Daniel Cretton, there's a lot of things that he did in this movie from a camera work, quote unquote filmmaking standpoint, if you want to say, that I think is better than the first three, but it still feels in line with the first three, even though it feels different in its own way. And obviously listening to Van Lathan and the Midnight Boys react to the podcast, they were talking about like just the sort of the moodier vibe to it. And again, there is like sort of a like a literal blueness to the movie as well too. But again, you can watch all four of them in a row, and they feel like of a franchise. Like if you like we were saying, if you do rip the fourth, if you really want to watch Love and Thunder, and I'm not gonna lie. I guess we will admit it here. I did throw on a couple scenes of the YouTube on Love and Thunder the other day. Not the other day, maybe within the past like 3 months. I had Love and Thunder on YouTube, but it was for I wanted to I was on like a little bit of a Christian Bale. I think it maybe was some Heat 2 stuff. I was like thinking about some Heat 2 stuff. I was like, I need to watch some of these recent Christian Bale roles. We've got some Heat 2 takes we're saving, I guess. It is what it is. We're excited, but we got some takes. Mainly about Christian Bale. But but we like Bale as well, too. Obviously he was a great Batman. But, also Al Pacino never played Batman. But what are we saying for, for Bale, we were doing a little bit of a recent Bale role run, and I was like, let me queue up some of these Christian Bale scenes from Love and Thunder. And, the look of Bale's character in that is cool as well, too. Like, I do like the contrast of the monochromatic, villain there with obviously just the colorful world that Thor was in that Taika Waititi has established. And then just, the galacticness that sort of is extra colorful there with Thor's world anyways, the Bifrost and stuff as well. But, again, if you're going to watch the four Thor movies in a row, there is going to be a distinct 2 and 2 tonal shift with those movies. And if you watch the four Captain America movies, obviously, again, shout out Sam Wilson, but I think it is appropriate to give him his own franchise as well, too. Like, you wouldn't necessarily, include the Amazing Spider-Man with this Spider-Man, and you wouldn't necessarily, again, like, I'm not trying to say, like, you don't want the, the Captain America movie with the other ones, but I'm just saying, like, it's a different storyline. Again, Sam Wilson is his own version of Captain America. So, you have the Steve Rogers Captain America trilogy, and if they have, obviously a couple more Captain America movies, but he has a show and a movie as well, too, for Sam Wilson. So you have, like, the Sam Wilson Captain America franchise, Captain America IP as well. But, either way, for, the Captain America trilogy, if you watch those, there is going to be a little bit of a difference between the first two, or between the 1 and 2, and then obviously, Civil War is still a little bit more in line there with 2. And you do have the excuse of Captain America, the first Avenger, first soldier. You do have the excuse of that being a period piece. So that does get away with it being, that World War One. Is it No, it's 2. It's 2. Obviously, I think it's 2. But, you do have that World War II setting there that does kind of give you a natural out for it being different. And then you can update into the modern, sleek action movies, with the other two, once he actually, gets frozen in time and then actually wakes up in modern day. But, again, there is going to be a little bit of a difference there from a filmmaking standpoint. The Avengers as well, like the Russo brothers handled the last two. And, the Avengers is maybe one where you would expect a little bit more variety in the filmmakers that would be approaching that. But, and there is more time spent between those as well, too. Obviously, Thor's a little bit like that, where you have some more time between Dark World and Ragnarok. So that gives you a little bit of excuse there, again, just in the story of it. But if you're going to watch those in a row, again, there's just going to be that difference. And it's not a bad thing. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Obviously, the Thor Ragnarok is better. So it's not, I'm not taking that away from the franchise. We want the tonal shift there because we want the upgrade for Ragnarok. It's one of the best MCU movies. But, like, I'm just saying, it's a credit to Destin Daniel Cretton that he was able to maintain what they had already done with the previous 3 Spider-Man movies. And, again, still be able to improve and add his own, unique style to it for this one as well too. Just incredible. So, really, like we're saying, really a great shout out to him here. And really, I think that he is, like we're saying, up next for being the big director in the MCU here. And I guess I don't even know if the Russo brothers are locked in for this. I would assume they would be locked in for the Secret Wars movies after Doomsday. But again, obviously they kind of only, quote unquote, only brought them back as well too, because they just had to get all the old guys back together to have that sort of certainty there in some ways. Like, again, I'm not saying that they're lowering the ceiling for the movie, because I think the ceiling for the movie is still really high, and I think the ceiling for the movie that they would have had if they don't bring them back is not, it's not higher than what they have now. But they've definitely, again, like we're saying, raised the floor for that Avengers movie. But I guess the MCU is just also the big winner here as well too, for just what the phase looks like at this point, and just how people, again, just feel walking out of a theater experience, because it's been a minute since Marvel has had that type of buzz as well too. And I think, again, there is, once we get removed from Spider-Man, and if we do have a, quote unquote sort of mid-theater experience outside of the Avengers, like, we're gonna look back at this Spider-Man movie and be like, well, of course Spider-Man movie, of course it worked, it's Spider-Man, like, that has to work. If that doesn't work, then Marvel's really cooked. But that's the point. If Spider-Man doesn't work, it's really cooked. And not to say that the last movie didn't work, but again, that was a little bit like the Avengers attempt here, if we're being honest. So, again, I don't know if that, all the signs continue to point to this Doomsday movie being like a solid C+. But yeah, either way, we still hold out hope. But again, that was a little bit like that, where we're like, I don't know if we have a ton to do with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and with the character right now, or what they did have to do, I guess, reset the memory and stuff. Again, there was just like, and kill off Aunt May. Like, there was just a couple of plot points, but in terms of a whole movie, like, they needed a whole movie. So, like, okay, let's bring in a bunch of Spider-Men and make this whole movie now. But again, in terms of them like telling their own sort of story in a way, like, this is them getting back to it. And like we said, obviously Shang-Chi has been in this phase well too. Like, there have been good movies in this phase, but this is a big hit as well too. So they've had like the good cuts on the album, but this is like the #1 single, I guess, that they finally dropped. So I guess, maybe, I don't know if we can totally compare it to Iceman, because I think the #1 single for Iceman got there a little bit, more suspiciously than than Brand New Day. I think Brand New Day is a much more convincing #1 single than Janice, than Janice is. But either way, I guess there is some similarities there, where it's like, oh no, okay, the MCU can still drop a hit at this point, like a unanimously kind of loved movie as well. It probably, going back again, 2021, I'd have to go like, Chat GPT, what was the timeline for COVID there? But 2021 again, that had to be a major reason for sure, as to just even the momentum of people going to see movies. And again, like we're saying, just the attitude of people at the time. Obviously it was reviewed well, but again, it hasn't been like it is what it is. It hasn't been the type of movie that, like, quote unquote revived Marvel as well too. And like we're saying, you go back and look at like the Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts has got good reviews. The fans look back at that movie and really like it, but it's not that movie that quote unquote like revives Marvel. Like, this is that movie that gets Marvel back in that in that top notch. And they became a little bit of a victim of themselves as well too. Like, they were dropping really, really great movies. Like, by the time we got to the end of that phase, did Black Panther did get nominated for Best Picture, didn't it? Like, I mean, literally they've got a movie nominated for Best Picture. And again, it is a little bit like, yeah, I guess getting Coogler to make a movie is a little like drafting Jokic in the later rounds. It's not quite like that. Or, it's not quite like getting Downey, obviously, like, oh, stock's a little bit lower, something like that. Because he was obviously a great early filmmaker at that point, having gotten Creed and Fruitvale Station, in the resume at that point already. But, again, just to snag what could be even just the best filmmaker of the generation, and just that extra level as well too, where it's like, again, I guess not to do the comparison game with, other creators right now, but it's like, again, you could have guys that are, I guess the Russo brothers as well. It's like you could snag a guy that's a really great creative for Marvel, and then it's like, oh no, we got this guy making a movie who's like the best the best director in the last 50 years. Hey, I guess 50 years would be 25 and then 75. So Coogler already better than Scorsese, chat. In the 5 Scorseses versus the 5 Cooglers. Hey yo, put them up against each other. Let's go. Let's do the verses, chat. Let's do the DVD verses. We're ready for it at this point. I feel like once you get 5 on the resume, like that's just like a that's just like a number. That's like that 5 All NBAs where it's like once you get 5 All NBAs, it's like, oh, I guess we have to put him in the Hall of Fame. That's just that's the bar. So it's like, I guess, you're an all-time great director, and I guess, if your 5 movies are better than anybody else's 5s, hey, yo. But, again, just that extra level, obviously. So, again, looking back, it makes sense that, again, that movie specifically obviously got nominated. It's not like, again, Infinity War, but, Infinity War is what I'm saying, where the MCU, was just making movies that were so good. We're like, should Infinity War just be nominated for Best Picture as well too? Let's see what it got here. Yeah, it received a Best Picture nomination as well. Did it win for like special effects or something maybe as well? Yeah, of course, rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman as well. But again, you have Black Panther getting nominated potentially. You have Infinity War, and I know that Into the Spider-Verse is not MCU technically, but obviously it is that superhero genre and just what the expectation is for what movies, telling stories with the superhero vehicle. It just continues to set the expectation for what filmmaking around those movies can be as well too. Again, even if it's not necessarily directly tied into the MCU. And who knows, in like 15 years, we'll probably be tying Into the Spider-Verse into the MCU. Obviously, we already had Doctor Strange tumbling through an animated world. So we know that animated worlds are, if we're going new rock stars, we know that animated worlds are in the MCU. So by product, Earth 616, the animated world's got to be, Miles Morales is over here. And I think, Spidey tracker at the end of this movie was located exactly where Doctor Strange fell through in the pinpoint portal and blah, blah. So, again, we could connect that Into the Spider-Verse movie probably already to the MCU. But again, for the quality expectations, it definitely was there. So, just the bigger picture, like they had become like a real movie studio in some sense. Like Marvel was like A24. And I know that again, it's like Marvel's ruining the movie industry because once you put a movie actor in a cape, apparently he can't be a great all-time actor at that point. Like it is a little, again, obviously I get the conversation both ways, the balance of it, but it does get a little ridiculous to be like a guy can't be a great actor in a superhero movie, like just because Sylvester Stallone played the same role in different plots. So it's like, or Arnold played the same guy. Like Arnold was basically playing a superhero this entire time. The problem was we just didn't have the idea to make it the same character for 8 consecutive movies. Vin Diesel, like, just because Vin Diesel doesn't wear a cape, like the man, the man's obviously still a hero. Chad, what are we gonna say? Vin Diesel's not a hero, but again, the point is, obviously these things, these things can still be good for the industry as well too. In some ways, again, obviously, you want to have, like we're saying, the small, the independent movies, the creatives, the originals, all that different stuff. But again, if Marvel is making prestige level superhero movies, then shout out to Marvel. And that is where they had gone to that level at some point. And again, I think they were crushing movies in the genre there for a while, and there were some, obviously it was hit or miss. They would miss with a movie, and then they would crush with a sort of genre movie. Again, Shang-Chi, great superhero movie, great action movie. Thunderbolts, really fun action movie. I don't think Thunderbolts is a great action movie, but it's a really, really fun action movie. And I, speaking of scenes to rewatch as well too, I had queued up that Bucky Barnes on the highway scene as well, and him taking the gun away from the one guy, and then he like charges it, I don't know, cocks it, pause, but he loads it, I guess that might be a pause as well too, but he I guess, and I'm assuming it's a shotgun because it's got the pump situation underneath. I guess the spoiler alert, not a gun guy over here. Just we know that they use them in action movies and they're lethal. But and I guess but what are we saying? I think it's some sort of shotgun situation where he takes it and then pumps it. Pumps it. That's what I'm looking for. Hey, that is also a pause. But still, I think that's what I'm looking for. He takes it, he pumps it, and then he uses it to blow out a tire. I guess at that point in a Marvel way, instead of just like firing on the people in the truck, obviously you take out a tire, flip the truck, and obviously they all survive because it's Marvel. But again, the point is, this they they kind of needed to get back to that level in some ways. And I don't know if Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to get the Oscar nomination that Black Panther got. I did see a comment online at one point that was like, Tom Holland's going to get an Oscar nomination for Spider-Man. And, he might as well, too. Again, it's an emotionally gripping story. We'll have to see what the rest of the film year looks like. I think that, the best actress category has been a little bit stronger this year. Obviously with Obsession and some stuff, and I think maybe the guy from Obsession as well too could be in the mix as well. But I think again the little extra level of star power this year has been in the best actress side of things, and I think there's been some great supporting stuff. Maybe it's more Pattinson again. Like Pattinson's a star, but he's been like in like 4 or 5 different supporting things as well too. So we haven't had like, oh, this guy's the lead guy in like 2 or 3 real star vehicles at the point. Again, like Gosling is one movie a year. He's doing one movie that his kids want, one PG-13 movie a year. Michael B is, I think, not acting again until 2027 as well too. Like again, does he have something here slated for the rest of 2026 that I'm missing? But I think it's going to be that Thomas Crown movie that we were breaking down the trailer. That's going to be his next acting debut at this point. So, again, just for the field of nominations this year, and obviously, again, there's that I don't want to call that underground, quote unquote, that underground tier. Like if it was like the, of course, the best rap category for the Grammys, it's like, the list of guys that, should get nominated. But again, obviously and I guess maybe the Oscars do look into the underground a little bit more sometimes than the Grammys, for better or worse. But there is the underground tier that, we need to, know the names of there as well too. But again, the point is he could definitely get there. He would be on the list at if it was like the Wooden Award, the Naismith Award for college basketball, where it's like, who are the 50 guys that are on the watch list for Player of the Year? Like Tom Holland is on the watch list now, of course, for Best Actor. Again, obviously, again, for me, it's not. Like we, again, speaking of Michael B, like we left the theater with Michael B after Sinner. You're like, that guy is gonna potentially, you're like, that guy could potentially win it as well too. So when you do have a category that does ultimately go down to 5 nominations, ideally it is one of those performances that you walk out of the theater going like, that guy could actually win the Oscar as best Oscar for Best Actor, and then obviously the culmination of those, put those together and then pick from it. If you're, if you leave it, it's like, okay, that's a nomination, it's that next year. But again, it's a watch list for sure. And the point is, it's that, the point is, it's a gripping lead man performance from Tom Holland, which is something that, again, we hadn't really gotten yet from Spider-Man, but they hadn't really demanded it from him yet as well too. So it's not to say, again, Tom Holland, blew it in the NBA Finals. Tom Holland was LeBron in the 2000 NBA Finals, and the second Spider-Man bombed because Tom Holland was the lead of it, and blah blah blah. It's like, no, that wasn't the case. The case was just that Marvel was, do you say bogging down these movies? But maybe it did work as well too. Like maybe it was by the time we got to this movie, we could actually have a movie where Tom Holland, not say that because he was obviously great as the Spider-Man character before. Like he really, again, has always been kind of that classic, you can see him as Peter Parker and it just makes sense. And, he obviously the gymnastic stuff, just kind of him naturally moving as Spider-Man as well too, like has always made sense. But, again, for him, like being the emotional leader of the movie, like, you had, of course, Robert Downey Jr. in the first one, that was able to, really be, again, the mentor figure there. You had, of course, Samuel Jackson and Jake Gyllenhaal in the second one as really, of course, Oscar-level actors to help take a lot of pressure off of that movie. And then you do also have Benedict Cumberbatch in the third one as well, too. Again, like, comfortable Marvel veteran. Like, maybe that's a little, like, that might have been like the Dan Hurley UConn team from this last year, where it's like, okay, maybe Caravan and Mullins aren't going to win the title, but you're comfortable with those guys. You're comfortable on the court with Doctor Strange, and you could really you can get to the Final Four with Doctor Strange. You win the title with Robert Downey Jr., but you can get to the Final Four with Doctor Strange. You'd be fine. But again, you don't have any other. You have Sadie Sink obviously as a star person. But Sadie Sink is not a movie star as well, too. Sadie Sink has been, of course, for her career at this point, a TV star. And I'm sure, Stranger Things has really spaced out them, dropping the seasons with the, cast getting more opportunities. I'm sure that there has been, again, other opportunities that I'm just not seeing for her getting, maybe some horror films or something. I'm not sure. But, again, in terms of big mainstream movies, like this is obviously, kind of, I would assume like her first big blockbuster that she's done. I could be missing one here. Let me double check the Sadie Sink filmography real quick. But again, like who is gonna be the the lead actor, the emotional gravity, and obviously Zendaya has continued to make that rise over their career as well too. But the Spider-Man name, is going to demand him to carry that for this movie. So yeah, just films in general. I don't know if I've seen too many of these. The Whale, a psychological drama. Darren Aronofsky. Oh, okay. So working with creatives there. Dear Zoe does sound familiar, but yeah, I can't say I recall that too much. A Sacrifice, Odessa in 2025. Post-apocalyptic musical drama. Hey, yo. Definitely a unique take there. Oh, Regina Hall is in this. Okay, that'll get us to queue this up. That's for sure. But it's on Hulu. Okay, released spotlight pictures through Hulu on. That's why we didn't see that one. But see, only 3 films in the last 4 years for Sadie Sink. At not only again, obviously major television role with Stranger Things. But I'm just saying from the big film side of things, there isn't just that she hasn't had that title run yet for her as a film star. But, Tom Holland had that opportunity to, if we're going to continue with the sports metaphor, he had the opportunity here to be the lead guy in a title run. You have to say, like, they really did. I guess, I don't know if you can say a title run for this movie, but I think for what this movie had to be in the superhero genre, again, I think this is definitely that Final Four run, I guess, compared to Doctor Strange. Now we're kind of mixing the analogy. Maybe Doctor Strange is like an Elite Eight. I don't know. But, again, whatever, the quote unquote championship, mini championship in-season tournament. It's just like if Spider-Man won the in-season tournament with this one. I don't know. But, again, whatever sort of, mini title, again, maybe it does win the title. Maybe this, our guy Destin Daniel Cretton's, holding up the Oscar for Best Picture at the end of the year. That'd be awesome. As well, too, the first ever Spider-Man to win Best Picture. That would be crazy as well. But, and I guess, no, I think Obsession would win over Spider-Man at this point. It is what it is. Obviously, I think Obsession would win over the Odyssey as well too. If we're just going with mainstream Oscars, again, I would have to see what which indie films are gonna ruin the ruin the fun for all of us. We're gonna be we're all excited for Obsession, and then just like what's this movie that's won 4 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri? We made another one. Hey, but it's like, well, now that's a franchise. I don't even know what that counts there. But and do we need what would that movie even be? I don't even know what 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri is. So I don't even know what 4 would be. But and maybe would it be 2? I don't know which. What's better for the third one? Is it better if there's another billboard at the end or one less? I don't know. Again, we need to go back and check that one out. Maybe it's sneaky needs to be 2 billboards outside it. But I guess that could just be the prequel. Oh, Chad, see, I mean, this is where Hollywood's missing. There's another franchise right there. I can't believe there's not a Billboards franchise on Wikipedia. Hey, it's like 7 billboards outside. It's like how many billboards? This is a whole row of billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri. Hey, the final, there's like a prestige TV show. Ebbing, Missouri is all billboards now. At this point, people are just living inside of billboards. I guess inside of Ebbing, Missouri. Maybe it gets a little, a little abstract at that point. Definitely a little detour from, maybe the original. But, again, either way, they were really relying on Tom Holland and Zendaya to be the, like we're saying, the emotional anchors of the movie. But for their on-screen, not their on-screen chemistry and stuff, of course, that too, but just them as actors, for them to rise to that level. They needed them to be leading scorers. They not, do you need them to drop 30 or whatever? But, over the course of a season, whatever the analogy is, 28, 27 points. Like, they needed them to just be the lead scorers for the game. And they were definitely that. And again, not to say that Tom Holland didn't drop similar stats in the other game. That's, I guess, just to kind of see how it goes. But, it's just to, look at it from another angle. But, he was still putting up good numbers in the other ones. It's just, again, he had the other creatives there. Where it's like, maybe Tom Holland did have more points than RDJ here, but RDJ did have more, he was like Magic Johnson, he had more assists, more rebounds. He was just setting up Tom Holland the whole time. And, you look at the film, getting, but it's like, okay, Tom Holland was getting into his own looks this time. He was setting people up, and because he really was. Like, he was telling his own story, but then was also being the emotional anchor, like we're saying, for Sadie Sink in this movie as well too, and getting the assists that way as well. I guess technically no rebounds for Tom Holland in this one because he was turning everybody down. But he could have got, there was a couple of rebound opportunities. I guess how does that work? I don't know how that works on the box score. I guess if like, hey yo, if you turn down a rebound, but what does that go on the box score as? But a block? I guess that might be a block. I don't know. But I think a block would be the other way, right? Like you step in and you block somebody from, getting a rebound. I guess is what it would be. But I'm thinking, the scenario that I'm thinking of is if, if you tip the rebound to somebody else. Hey, yo, I guess that would be an assist, in the box score that we're thinking of. Hey, yo, but, in the NBA box score, does like, if Bill Russell tips it to Sam Jones in 1950, hey, yo, does Bill Russell get the rebound or does Sam Jones get the rebound or do they both get the rebound? Hey, yo, what do NBA stats mean anything? But I guess that's kind of what Tom Holland was doing with the rebound attempts in this one. He was like, "Girl at the elevator, nope, up over there." But either way, for Tom Holland again, and like we were saying before, we were wondering, what the sort of lead man. I guess we were wondering more so like what the lead man opportunity was for Spider-Man outside of this. But the other Spider-Men, they were demanded, I guess, to be leading men the whole time in the franchise. And, I guess Tom Holland has had more time in the franchise now as well, too. So he's had more time to capture the Spider-Man role, the Spider-Man belt. But, again, like Garfield was the lead of both of those movies, like a little bit. And I guess the second one, you did have a little bit more star power, though, bringing in Jamie Foxx. But Jamie Foxx is not really in that much of that movie. And, you have him kind of not really being like a star personality in that movie, if that makes sense. Shout out to the character Max that he plays, but obviously, and I think the fact that we knew the character that Jamie Foxx played in Amazing Spider-Man 2 that quick, shows you how much we were just locked in on the Amazing Spider-Man. And I do gotta say, not to expose the friend group or anything, I guess it's not even an expose because it shows you like how tied to an era your opinion of these things can be as well too, because literally the first thing, and maybe it was just us telling ourselves this as well too, but the first thing after the theater was like, well, it's not better than the Amazing Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man still the favorite. But I guess maybe that was the take. It's like, just again, but like we're saying that we were but children when the Amazing Spider-Man dropped. So what are we gonna do? Like, we can't go back in time and watch the Spider-Man A Brand New Day with the same perspective we watched Amazing Spider-Man was. So that's the twist of these superhero movies that you can. But that's where this movie did really, like we're saying, work as well too. That it kept us hooked as a movie going adult now. Spider-Man A Brand New Day really did work. And I think the ultimate test as well too for a movie, in any sense, is of course, do you want to rewatch this movie? And that could just be a generic question. It's like, okay, in my life, do I want to make sure I got to throw on Spider-Man Brand New Day at least one more time? Of course that could be the case. But and that might be again like the case with like the Eternals. Like the Eternals, I'd be like, okay, maybe I'll run that. Yeah, maybe I'll make sure to cue that up one or two more times before we get out of here. But maybe Spider-Man Brand New Day, I think it really is in that like I could go back to the theater and watch this right now. Like I don't think it's in the, again, it's not like in the 10 out of 10. I guess not to disrespect. It's a great movie. It's not. I'm not putting it in the Sinners, Goodfellas level. Hey, but again, it is a movie that I know that I do want to go back and obviously be entertained. You're just kind of obviously just that what did I miss as well too, especially from a Marvel standpoint. How Easter egg heavy and again the attention to detail. Hopefully that is going to be applied there. It is a little of that old school like is the the access to the movie is a little ways away. If I'm going to see it again, I have to go back to the theater as well. But it just is that instant rewatchability test. That I would throw this on and have this on in the background and watch this. And and this has been something as well too. Obviously, obviously in rewatching movies and celebrating movie anniversaries on the pod and stuff. It is trying to focus on the good parts of movies. Obviously the fun that you have. Hey hot take. Focusing on the entertainment that you have with movies. But especially watching the rewatch. Listening to the Rewatchables pod over the years and stuff, and just again, what I guess is important in a movie. But just the rewatchability of the movie, but then even just focusing on the high points in the movies as well too, and like what did the movie do well, and did the movie do enough well, obviously to get you to watch it again. And then of that, doing that well, like how well did it do that, if that makes sense. So like we're saying, are there some areas of this Spider-Man, could you cut out some minutes here and, get this down to like a 205, could still have a lot of the emotional storytelling in there. Yeah, I'm sure there's a version as well. But, again, like we're saying, the test of this movie is not, and I'm putting this exaggeratorily. I'm saying this in hyperbole to make the point, but you're quote unquote willing to sit through the 225 to watch the good points of the movie, if that makes sense. Again, like we're saying, a movie obviously like Sinners, it's just you sit down, every moment of that movie is well crafted, it's perfect, it's just you don't have to sit through that movie to get to this scene. Like the point of that movie is it's a great movie. Again, Goodfellas, it's, it does have points where it's like, oh, Goodfellas, I really want to watch this part. This part's coming up. But, again, every scene is great. You're not waiting to get to the next scene. It's just taking you there. Like there are parts of Spider-Man where you are, maybe waiting to get to the next scene. But again, when you get there, it really does hit in those moments when Spider-Man is really, really working. Is honestly like some of the best MCU, I gotta say, some of the best MCU storytelling that we've had. And, again, like I've said, I have my personal bias toward movies and toward characters and, toward times that I've watched movies as well, too. Like I've said, in the past, I might still not necessarily go back and, have this movie as like a more favorite movie than Doctor Strange, because I was just, I was younger when Doctor Strange dropped. And I guess, I've spent more time with it, but, I watched it in a different mindset. But, I guess, like I was saying earlier, when I said an impressive theater experience, like that's kind of how I was viewing this now. Again, maybe, as an adult watching Spider-Man. Because again, like is Thunderbolts impressive? Like, again, Thunderbolts is a really, really great action movie, hits a lot of great genre beats, has a lot of really cool moments. Like we're saying, Bucky showing up, they hit the underground subterranean set. Like, there's just a lot of cool moments to be in Thunderbolts with. And again, they're like we're saying, we watch movies at every level quality. So, again, obviously you have the conversation about what the movie is in the moment, but like, obviously as the Rewatchables pod, and just again, the rewatchability of a movie, obviously you watch movie at every level, like we're saying. But, again, for the instant level of what they were, trying to accomplish here with Spider-Man, of course, again, it was obviously, again, the storytelling really did work. Even though if again, I'm not as, drawn into it, captivated, giving myself up to it, the same way that you do when you're, a kid in that sense. But it is like, again, the emotional storytelling that they were able to hit you with here really was, great stuff as well. So, yeah, again, I guess shout out to the screenwriters for that, if we're just going for shout outs here as well. But again, shout out to Tom Holland as well too. And it being focused on Tom Holland as well, this was definitely a point that was being made, throughout the critic reviews that I was seeing. But also it was, again, one of the, basically one, I don't know if we do like a top 5 over the top 5 things that were, said out of the theater that when we were walking out, but it was one of the instant reactions was just how, much of contain, I don't know if contain's the right word, but how much of just a Spider-Man story it felt. Where again, there had been these other Spider-Man stories kind of bogged down by some of these, not bogged down, but maybe a little bogged down by some of these MCU stuff. And again, Homecoming is still a great movie. Like I guess, great movie, throwing that out there. Like, again, do I go back and watch Homecoming all the time? But Homecoming still works as a movie. Like, Michael Keaton is a very, very fun villain for the MCU. Like, obviously, again, the RDJ is, good. He's great as Iron Man in that movie. Like, he's not, anytime he shows up as Iron Man in the MCU, it does work, but it does still change the tone of the movie a little bit. And like we're saying, they were shifting the focus of Spider-Man early on. So, you're kind of working, almost, working backwards a little bit to get to this point. And, again, you had to erase the memory, you had to kill the Ant-Man in the third movie. It took a while, but by the time we got here, Tom Holland was to a point where he's perfectly capable of carrying a great movie like this. And the Spider-Man property, the Spider-Man story, the MCU itself, is actually set up for it to be, a good contained neighborhood Spider-Man story. You get a good, view of the villains and stuff, of course, in, the early part of the movie, the good overview there. But, again, just overall, it being contained to what the Spider-Man universe is, again, was just sort of a nice, touch for the Spider-Man fans. But again, even though I'm not necessarily like thinking about that necessarily, because I'm not, again, a comic reader, so I'm not like, for me, honestly, again, connecting it to the MCU versus not, I'm here for it either way because I am here for the movie experience. So if you're connecting it to the greater films, that keeps me interested because that's what I'm interested to. But if it's a great solo movie, it's just the lack of MCU connections is I'm just not gonna get it's just gonna go over my head. I'll be like, okay, that was just a great movie, and we'll just enjoy it. But again, from what it does from a storytelling standpoint, and from what it lets you focus on, again, they were really able to elevate points of the Spider-Man story again in sort of the neighborhood way that hadn't been elevated before. And again, this was really great. So we gotta just actually just get into the movie as well too, and go through and see what was happening here in Destin Daniel Cretton's semi masterpiece. I don't know what is superhero. I think it's a superhero masterpiece, maybe superhero master. That is still like even that's a pretty good list. I don't know. I just shout out to Destin Daniel Cretton. He was doing a great job here. But after the break, we will go through the movie itself and break down Spider-Man: A Brand New Day and see what's going on here right after this. All right, chat. It's time to go through Spider-Man: A Brand New Day and figure out what was happening in this greatest, latest piece from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I do have to be honest as well too. We do have the new Rockstars video pulled up in the background here because I do have to remember what these scenes are from the movie AO. I mean, we were obviously able to go to see it, and I was legitimately considering bringing a notebook into the theater and being like, you know what, nothing's more important than the pod. We got to take notes. We got to do what we got to do. But I guess, that is true. But I was like, I just, I almost feel like, that type of person could almost, annoy another person's theater experience in some way. It's not like having a phone out by any means. But I just, it is one of those things. Like, you just want, people want to be focused on the movie. So, if it was, a screening where people had notebooks, that'd be a different thing. But, obviously, where you're, going again, like we're saying, focusing on the movie, that was the priority. And, it does become one of those things where you're like, okay, now I'm like 7 notes behind. I'm like 7 scenes behind on my note from where I'm, trying to write all this down. And as the movie's going, of course, you just can't stop it in the movie theater. But, either way, obviously, shout out, new Rockstars is able to have a good collection of scenes and their breakdown videos. So, we will use that as a help to remember sort of the, scene by scene situation more so than just like the basic Wikipedia plot going through. And I was reading that as well too today at work. I was trying to tell people to stop coming into the restaurant. I'm trying to take notes on Spider-Man here, but that wasn't happening. But obviously, we did need people in the restaurant as well too. But I was trying to read the plot again just to, keep the story in our mind. And it was like the first paragraph in, like, I guess like the last like 3 paragraphs are like the last 45 minutes of the movie. And the first paragraph is like, this is not like the equivalent ratio of what the movie is here. But, there's some details in the first part that maybe get left out of like the greater plot sense. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe, if you're recapping a movie in that way, you sort of kind of want it to sort of, be maybe beat for beat in a recap-ish sort of way. It's like, okay, we can sort of just sum up this 30-minute stretch of the movie with this couple sentences. It's like maybe, again, there could be some efficiency here, but that's not the point. Again, the point is the high points of this movie is really, really, really great. And, really does work as well too. But, even starting off with the opening credits as they rolled through and had the, of course, Spider-Man themed Marvel credits, they did have the, Spider-Man erasure as well too, of course, reminding us and reinforcing the erasure from the end of the last one. But I thought it was interesting just to have, a Spider-Man focused Marvel title card in general, because I feel like the only time they have ever done that is Black Panther, with, of course, the passing of Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace. As I was saying that, I was trying to remember, did they maybe do that for like the Loki end of the season title card? I'm trying to remember if they had the Marvel title card at every single Loki episode, every single TV episode. I think they did. And maybe they did do special situations for that. But for the movies themselves, I want to say that the only themed title card they have done so far is for Chadwick. So I thought maybe it was a little interesting for, the Tom Holland star power of it. Maybe it is something that Marvel does going forward, more, plot or just Easter egg focused Marvel title cards. Maybe they start getting a little more creative with that instead of just, again, because now the universe is so expansive as well too, versus it used to just be an original collection of Avengers. You could just have maybe a simpler title card there. But from now that, again, the X-Men, all these different variations, you could still have major representations of all the different things and what's happening at the moment, or sort of the leaders of the groups. But again, you could sort of focus it as well too for more story specific moments. So maybe it is the start of that. But it could also be, like we're saying as well too, a little bit of a, accreditation to where Tom Holland is at right now in the MCU. And it is interesting to think about where he is at sort of compared to Iron Man in some ways. We talked about this with like Brady and Mahomes as well, where, obviously, and, Mahomes is playing in a great era of quarterbacks. There's a lot of, especially now, the league continues to, get, a good young quarterback or two every year. Maybe it's not like the NBA, getting star talent, but there are, a lot of really, really productive names, at least at the quarterback position right now, it seems. But, obviously, again, the Brady era that he was in, Manning, Rodgers, Favre, Breeze, Rivers, Roethlisberger. Again, there is just a nostalgia, a legendary status that you look back at that era with. But again, there was some closeness as well. Like there was some debate throughout a lot of the career there. Again, obviously, and again, Brady was winning a lot of the debate as well too. But there would be some good debate as maybe who would be the guy that you would take as the quarterback, and maybe the point is maybe the separation at one point from Mahomes being the number one to guy number two maybe was a little bit more, or you'd have to go back and I guess see different seasons at Brady's career, where it would have been the most. But like, could Mahomes have had an equal separation from quarterback 1 and 2 at a point in the league from where Brady had that, if that makes sense? And again, Iron Man is a little bit like that. Like Robert Downey Jr. was definitely the leader of the Avengers. Make no mistake about it. Like the star power, yes. Iron Man, I think, as the, definitely up until the introduction of Spider-Man. But even then, Spider-Man in the Avengers sense was still a little bit more of a low-key villain or low-key hero, and they still had him literally being mentored by Iron Man as well too. So physically on screen, Robert Downey Jr. is the star leader over Spider-Man as well. But Robert Downey Jr. was a star in an era where there was a lot of other great Marvel stars as well too. Chris Evans and like we're saying, Thor. There was a definite order there. Like you would say, Iron Man is the most popular, and then Cap is a very strong number two, and then Thor is kind of that sneaky third, but still a really very strong big three. Obviously, I think the Loki show has retroactively continued to improve Loki's star power rating in the MCU, but Loki, like the Tom Hiddleston character, was very popular at the time, as well too, just being the fun villain of the MCU, just again a very, fan favorite there. Like I think the closeness between Captain America and Iron Man was pretty close. And again, I think Civil War as well too, for getting political about it, Civil War was definitely very interesting there, because I think that maybe Captain America in the MCU version of the world, like I think maybe, and this is where again, a movie like Civil War addressing the plots they do, is an interesting movie because in the real world, obviously, I think Iron Man does have some real, signing the Sokovia Accords, getting I guess, working with the government's probably not the the number one thing, but again, the thought of obviously, like they're saying, an unchecked group of heroes, you get the sort of real world sense of what Iron Man is doing there. But of course, in the MCU world, with where we have, these sort of pure movie protagonists, I guess, obviously they've not all pure all the time. Obviously, people like Scarlet Witch and stuff had some moments, but, again, in the movie sense of it, like, and especially for most of those Avengers movies, especially for that one at the time, again, like we're saying, the MCU politics of it, like maybe not signing the Sokovia Accords is probably the better way to go. But, again, either way, for the popularity of it, like I think Iron Man and Captain America are pretty close. I don't think that there is a close second right now to Spider-Man in the MCU in a major way. And obviously, again, we already said rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick would have been the actual like face of the MCU at this point. Does he have a cameo in this? I'm not saying that he would have been like the same sort of, literal father figure to Spider-Man in the movies, but he would have been the guy that everybody in the Avengers would have looked to in those Avengers movies, and he would have been the main presence, again, of the Earth Force, I guess, just in the cinematic universe when they're moving around. But, as of right now, there isn't that main second guy. Obviously, you look at the comics, Hulk carries some great all-time popularity. Again, all the X-Men as well too are still going to have their things. Like you would say that Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine would be there, of course, in an all-time superhero portrayal and the iconicness of that character. It would be really interesting to debate though. Like because Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is one of those like perfect castings. Like maybe is Hugh Jackman as Wolverine like a better casting than any Batman? Like, whoa, I don't know if that's a hot take. But, again, the other hot take would be, is Tom Holland as a character like closing in on the iconicness of, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine? Again, the sort of one-of-oneness of Hugh Jackman right now does definitely help, where, again, Spider-Man and Batman do have the recast. So, Tom Holland does have, I guess, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire also being super iconic, not helping his case there. But, for his generation, he is obviously, again, you see the box office number here. And, for a generation like myself, we maybe still identify with the Andrew Garfield generation, and the people before us, they'll still identify with the Tobey Maguire generation. But all of us, we can't deny the quality of this Spider-Man generation, which is the point. And they have us go into the movies, which is the point as well too. Like, we will still be going to these movies even if we identify, with the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie. We'll be, identifying it with $20 less because we all went to see the Tom Holland version as well. But again, for Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, like, he's not really in the MCU the same way that Tom Holland's Wolverine is, or same way that Tom Holland's Wolverine. Same way that I guess that's some different timeline. Maybe a what if universe, like the animated one where Tom Holland's Wolverine, but he does the Zendaya dance as or the Rihanna dance as Tom Holland's Wolverine. I don't know, or whatever the version is there. But Wolverine is what I meant for the Zendaya dance. But I guess it would be his. He would be. Well, no, it would be Tom Holland's Wolverine because it'd be Tom Holland as Wolverine. But doing Hugh Jackman just Wolverine because he's the character. But either way, what we're saying for again, for who else is going to be in the movies? Like, nobody else is reaching the iconicness level at this point of Spider-Man. So I think, again, it is a little bit of a credit to him as well. Just that you can have, I guess, a Marvel themed title card like Tom Holland, like that. So obviously, again, shout out to again, what they've been able to do there. And you do get, of course, a little bit of a time jump as well too. So it has been, I guess, a little while since Infinity War. At this point, that movie was like 2018, but Endgame, they did the 5-year time jump in Endgame, and then they do the 4-year time jump here in Spider-Man. So they have put us 9 years, I guess, now after Infinity War, maybe more, a decade, if I'm getting it right. Maybe some blip away situation as well too. I guess Tom Holland did get blipped away, so technically we take away 1 year there. So however you want to do the math. I guess the MCU blip math does make it weird, but obviously you do have the like we're saying, the time jump that they do have there. I guess this is gonna be confusing trying to I was pulled this up for the scenes, but they do have all the detail information in here as well too. So all the scenes from the other movies and stuff that is going on. But yeah, the great board as well too of all of the hero or all of the villain stuff that they had on there. Of course, like we're saying, the early opening part of the movie gets there is a little montage-ishness of him, of course, fighting off some of these villains. The great power comes great responsibility tag there as well. Of course, you keep the coffee cup with the letter from the first one, which I guess has been sitting in that coffee cup for a good 4 years now. So, I don't think and I think he did have coffee in that cup because it does have coffee on the lid. So I think what happened was, he went in, he got the coffee, he didn't read the letter, obviously. He didn't read the letter. He goes, he drinks the drink. He puts the letter in the drink. So does he wash the cup afterwards? He doesn't wash the lid, but he washes the cup. And, again, a 5-year crusted coffee cup, I feel like it's just the crust on that's a little worse. Maybe even gets a little moldy at some point as well, too. So is he constantly going back to the coffee shop? I mean, Zendaya probably leaves the coffee shop at some point. I mean, we know she does because she doesn't have a job in this one as well. I'm not to say that, Zendaya doesn't have a job. I'm just saying, she is currently on Indeed at the time as well. Indeed was the only company that didn't get product placement early on as well, too, because I think, in like the first 5 minutes, Tom Holland opens up like a, do we just do the product placement for him? But he like opens up a branded phone, takes like a branded pill, and then like brings in like a branded pizza box as well too, which, again, obviously you're going to have that, but yeah, they were definitely having it early on in the movie as well too. They're like, if people walk out of the theater, 20 minutes into this movie, we're making sure to get the ads in early. So they were making bank there as well. But I did think that him taking the pill was a little bit interesting as well. And again, there are some like, and maybe this is me, like, again, getting older. We're like, oh, we got adult stuff in these Marvel movies now. But there are some, like, we got Pill Pop and Spider-Man. There's some other, obviously, some jokes we'll get to later. We're like, oh, we got those jokes in a Spider-Man movie, I guess. But yeah, we've got obviously like an 80s action movie cop version of Spider-Man where he just like wakes up with like beer bottles next to his bed, and he's got old coffee cups and pills next to his head. Like, he really is modeling himself after Stallone. I don't know if that's something that he said over the course of his career. I don't know if Spider-Man by the third movie is gonna be like, I guess what's Zendaya's MJ, MJ, well, I got a letter for you, MJ. I don't know exactly how, Spider-Man, maybe the brain damage of falling off of all these skyscrapers, like, might be equivalent to some of the fights that Rocky had with Ivan Drago and Apollo Creed. So, by the end of and, especially two trilogies as well, too. Again, not a lot of superheroes have had that second trilogy, so we don't have a lot of evidence of what superhero CTE looks like by the time we get to the fourth and fifth movie. Or, again, even more than that, because we don't even count Avengers movies as, movies that you're in as well. And Tom Holland has at least appeared in two Avengers movie plus a Civil War movie. So, again, his superhero movie appearance count is getting pretty high at this point. So we don't really have evidence for, what kind of CTE. I think our CTE superhero studies are a little bit lower. Again, we don't even really have that in the NFL at this point. Now, just superhero funding is really, really good in these movies a lot of the times. I guess it fluctuates. Obviously, like, it's been good for Spider-Man, like we were saying early on. The Stark funding, AAU funding there, really worked for him. But now he is working a little bit more primitively. But yeah, either way, it does seem like for the majority of it, they do. The industry has access to some funds where they maybe could figure some of that stuff out a little bit. But yeah, either way, for Spider-Man, he is definitely, like we're saying, in his grown-up Spider-Man mode, where he's graduated from college, he's popping pills, he's got old, like we're saying, old food wrappers everywhere at this point. So I guess no, that coffee, okay, the coffee lid's a little cleaner than maybe I was giving it credit for as well. So he probably gave it a rinse, pause, and then and then obviously, stuck the letter in there and then kept it under his desk. So it was, I guess, he's been living up there the whole time as well too. Maybe Spider-Man would have to be more mobile as well. Maybe that'd be just a more, critique of all superheroes, but, obviously all Spider-Man, but, he's got himself a good location here as well. And, obviously Spider-Man on his own, a lot of times, again, working out of a, Aunt May situation or, Uncle Ben situation. So, an independent Spider-Man, obviously, new version here as well. But the Ned Instagram, of course, becomes a little bit of a through line throughout the movie here. The Grateful Ned, I don't know what we give that as a, Instagram name, rating. I think it is like a strong, a B minus. Obviously gives you a little bit of an insight into Ned's, interests as well too. I guess a Grateful Dead shout out there. So, again, Ned, obviously, I guess, a big Grateful Dead fan. I guess that's not necessarily our side of music. So I don't know what that, what that entails. If, he likes the Grateful Dead, that means he likes these, 4 or 5 other bands. And then, this, but I guess we do also learn as well, too, he likes the Lord of the Rings because, as New Rockstars points out later in their video, that when him and Peter Parker / Spider-Man are hanging out in the lobby later, they quote Lord of the Rings. So, again, I guess there is a couple of pop culture references to Ned there, but we do also sneaky see his Instagram grow a little bit. Pause over his time at college, so he is making friends. I don't think necessarily like his social is popping off, but again, clearly he is adding followers and being social while he's at college. Because I think he arrives with about 11. I think that first post that we get, he has 11 likes on the post, and then I think he's up to about 300 by the time we get there. So again, also sneaky, Ned is also featuring Zendaya in his post, so that might be a little bit of a nitpick. Like, 11 likes on a Zendaya post. I feel like even if we don't know that's Zendaya, like, I feel like if that's just in the algorithm, I feel like that's probably getting more than 11 likes. So, Ned's Instagram maybe actually probably does. I guess maybe that does show is Ned's Instagram is probably private as well, is really what that shows. So that was getting me thinking as well, like, the Tom Holland following Ned on Instagram storyline, like how did that work? Because Ned doesn't really know Tom Holland that well. He doesn't really know Peter Parker at all. Like obviously as a person, like he shows up to the house party later. Ned doesn't know who he is. Peter Parker, I guess at the end of the movie, to jump to the end of the movie, finds Ned in the flower. I guess it's like a flower shop. It's like a coffee shop that sells flowers. I guess it's New York City, obviously, but it was like it seemed like a very specific spot, like bookstore, flower, coffee shop situation almost. But either way, he sees Ned in the bookstore, flower, coffee shop situation, and goes up to him, and Ned doesn't really remember him from the party, but he's like, oh yeah, you had the flowers at the party as well. So I guess Ned just probably just like accepting followers maybe early on in college, just not really like knowing who Tom Holland is. But again, maybe not being the most followed Instagram, like he might have a more better idea of who's kind of following him at that point. So I feel like he might maybe know Peter Parker a little bit quicker, just seeing him on seeing him out. But again, if make no mistake, if the Grateful Ned has a public Instagram and he has even like, I guess the only thing would be he's not having Zendaya in the post early on. So it starts off with Ned. Shout out to Ned. But I'm just saying, like, if he ever starts off, I'm assuming there is one reel in there or one post, and he could also be posting stories as well too. Like I feel like they kind of set it up like he goes and clicks on a story, but then it pops up like a reel. So again, if he's posting reels, and if he ever starts a reel, maybe he's like playing it like it's like a challenge. He's like playing a game. He's like, oh, we're at a party playing Pong, and he's got Zendaya on his team, and he like ever starts off the reel with Zendaya. Like, there's no way that that's just not tens of thousands of likes in any world. But either way, obviously maybe the Grateful Ned was being a little different there. And I guess the MJ, we do kind of forget early on, because again they do reset the characters a little bit. Like Ned is kind of cool in this as well too. Again, I'm not saying he's like the most popular guy in school, but early in high school when he's hanging out with Peter Parker, I guess him and I have to go back and watch Homecoming. Like him and Ned are friends already. So I think that's why Peter Parker obviously goes to Ned as quickly as he does there, because again, the trust has already been built between the two guys. And I mean, it goes to show obviously the friendship, the friendship, pause, it runs deep in this movie. Some are saying online, obviously maybe even a stronger bond between Peter Parker and Ned than there are between Zendaya and Peter Parker, I guess, or MJ and Peter Parker, I guess is the right way to say it. But people are saying that there's probably a stronger male friendship there than there is a romantic relationship between MJ and Peter Parker. But either way, again, they've obviously the time spent between the two of them is obviously more time spent. Just again, they've been together for so many years at this point. But again, I think they were kind of like outcasts in high school was like the point, and that's like the Peter Parker story, right? So obviously they bring Ned in to have a friend there in this version of the MCU, but and again, that shows Destin Daniel Cretton again continuing to work with all these pieces as well too, and obviously making it great, and Ned's a great character as well, and I'm sure that there is comic accuracy for Ned. I'm sure Ned becomes like he becomes like an Avenger in the comics. Ned becomes like Ghost Blaster 16, or that would be like, I guess more like, I guess they don't really have like usernames in the Avengers. They don't put numbers in there. They're not like Supersonic 85 is going up against Ghost Blaster, 0 Omega. But Omega Blaster versus, I guess, who was the other guy we said? Supersonic? I guess that's just an old basketball team as well too. But Supersonic could be a superhero as well. Supersonic versus Omega. I guess Blaster is a pause. We know, we should have said it multiple times, but it's still a funny superhero name, so you gotta have it. It is what it is. But either way, I guess Ned, he's I guess Supersonic now, or Omega Blaster. But and trust me, we'll get to Spider-Man being Omega Blaster later on. Hey, pause. But for Ned, again, he's like kind of normal now. Like, he's like kind of charming. Like, obviously he's like pretty good in small talk conversations. He's not like overly like nerdy techie type guy. He obviously very concerned with not being weird, because he says that multiple times to Peter Parker and to Spider-Man as well too. Of course, he does have a mystery who is Peter Parker board, but I honestly don't feel like and obviously both people play it off as both Peter Parker and Spider-Man play it off as not weird, but I honestly don't think it is that weird as well, because, again, obviously it's Spider-Man. So I feel like, just somebody trying to unravel the secret identity of a superhero is, not that crazy. Like, you just think about, like, the true crime obsession we have now. Like, obviously, most superheroes a little bit different than the serial killer obsession, but just again, that obsession with the criminal, aspect of it all. Like, if there was just these, again, obviously you know, the relationships are different all the way around, but if there was just like these, if there was a Spider-Man or a Batman or something, like, I guess, and, again, with the MCU perspective of it, where these people are, just saving these cities from these extraterrestrial threats time and time again. But, again, in that situation, I don't think it would be weird for somebody to be like, let me try to just, in my spare time, one of my hobbies is like trying to piece together, who might Spider-Man be. Like, I feel like that might be like a little bit more common. Back, just that might be like a kind of like a top tier conspiracy theory. It'd be like, that just gets roped in with like JFK, and it's like, I don't know if JFK still exists in this world. Again, obviously this is, a whole debate with the Captain America going back with the Infinity Stones. Like, what does he stop? How far back in time is it? Again, like, well, how involved does Captain America get? Hey, but again, I don't know if the JFK assassination stuff. The Avengers, they stopped Thanos, but JFK, hey, but again, obviously, so many events that we can mention there. But again, that's just one of the conspiracy theories angles. Obviously, it'd be like the moon landing, JFK, and then like, who is Spider-Man would be like three big conspiracies in New York City. And I guess, do we have to consider a New York Knicks title in this Spider-Man movie as well too? Obviously, they were making this before Spider-Man won, before New York won the title. But is that a what's age the worst for doing the rewatchables? Probably a what's age the best for us as a Spurs fan. No reference of a New York Knicks title. But, maybe Peter Parker at one point is like, oh, the real superhero is Brunson, because, not even Peter Parker could win New York a title after all these years or whatever. Yeah, that would be interesting if Peter Parker did have a run as like a Knicks point guard and just like won him an NBA title and retired. Again, he doesn't have to like go all out and score like, 135 points a game. Like, he can just, put up a nice light 30. He can put up like a Jokic level stat line and just, cruise to a title. If they need him to just put up 50 at some point, it's like, man, Peter Parker just always delivers. It's like how the kid in The Incredibles like kind of like lightens up on the race. They're like, no, second place. It's like one year Peter Parker, like in the regular season, he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go for like third in MVP voting, and then just has like the best playoff run of all time. But again, there would be like one billboard where he'd be like swinging by, and it would be like, congratulations to the champion New York Knicks as well. But maybe, maybe in the blip, Brunson got traded to the Spurs. That's probably what happened as well too. And the Spurs ended up winning the title over the Knicks. Is the revisionist history there. So, shout out to Destin Daniel Creighton for rewriting that in the MCU, because again, there's no mention of the New York title, so it has to be San Antonio wins it, because it is, I think, modern day set here. But it says Aunt May passes in 2024 on the gravestone that he visits, but I guess it doesn't. We'd have to correlate that again. I don't know what the MCU math is here with the blip. Like, is it 2026? Peter Parker it's been 9 years, but it's not. It's 2026. Like, again, I don't really know what the math is there. But either way, shout out to Ned as well too. He is, I guess, not as like, well, he is an important part to this movie. Obviously, important part of the second act with him and Zendaya and the reconnection between the friend group there. Yeah, the homage to Jackie Robinson as well with the 42 number. Shout out. Hey, yo. Again, this is why we need to. This is what we need to just take notes next time and just know scene by scene. I guess that's right. They do remember. They do. New Rockstars reminding us that Ned was a sorcerer. We forgot about the Ned was just casually just a sorcerer at the end of the last one. So I guess we'll see. If that, of course, that obviously did not play into this one. Ned did not go to college for sorcery. I think it was a little bit more different than that. But he did. Again, display those powers at some point. So maybe that goes to almost show as well too. That wasn't considered actually in the end credit. I didn't even think about that till right now. But that wasn't considered because, of course, again, skipping to the end, there is sort of a, break this, an illusion. I guess we can't necessarily guarantee it's a break the spell moment, but at least an illusion to a break the spell moment with the handshake dap up at the end. But, if Ned was a sorcerer in the third Spider-Man movie, then maybe it's a little easier for him to get past the Doctor Strange spell. Maybe subconsciously he's like battling it off as well. Who's to say? But we do get the opening sort of Spider-Man swinging through the city sequence here, which, man, I wish I could just turn the computer around. Like, did you guys just see this shot? Because our guy DDC, the cinematographer, whoever he was or she was on this project, whoever they were on this project, was absolutely cooking on this opening shot. And this was, again, I don't know if this sequence was copied straight out of the video games. There was, I think they said the Midnight Boys, hey, oh, shout out. They said that like the tank sequence chase was very similar to a video game sequence. But I thought that this had a little bit of an Into the Spider-Verse type of feel. Of course, the one of the most iconic, just freeze frames of that entire two movies. Probably the most iconic, if we're being honest, is the freeze frame of him diving backwards into the city, but the city's on top of the screen, so he's like flipping upwards into the city. I did think that, of course, this was paying a little bit of an homage to that, but it's a little bit different because they have Spider-Man, of course, sitting upside down, attached to a beam. But the perception of it is crazy as well too, because again, I don't even know where this beam is located at in the city. They're like, this has to be like a satellite, like a low-hanging Stark Tech satellite somewhere. I don't know what kind of beam, again, this satellite would be made out of, but just the perception of it, like, it looks like he is, like, sitting in a, again, like, sitting in the sky above the city, but he is, again, still, like, in the city as well, too. Now, like I said earlier, the camera work throughout this, I think, is really, really great as well. But this opening sequence is, and I'm trying to go back. I was trying to find a version of the Amazing Spider-Man to find before this. I guess it didn't happen. It is what it is. But I'm gonna have to go back and queue up a couple of those swinging sequences because, again, the group that we were with, shout out to Champ, shout out Billy Buckets. Champ was saying that the Amazing Spider-Man sequences of him swinging were still a little bit better, but again, I just haven't seen those in so long, so I'm gonna have to go back and freshen up. But this opening one maybe could take the crown, take the gold medal for the #1 Spider-Man swings to the city sequence. I guess again, there are like some cool moments, like him using like the cranes to get through the city. Is that the first one? That might be the first one. Again, like that's a cool moment, But is that like a better done moment than this? This is pretty spectacular stuff. I don't know if they're going to show us this whole sequence on New Rockstars, but yeah. And again, we got a good shot of the phone here on this as well too. But he does the pull up transition. So now he's like hanging sort of, down into the city as well, but the camera's still on top of him. So you're like really looking down and seeing you're seeing the height there. And then when he drops, I mean, again, this is where the theater really works, because this is still gonna, I guess, honestly, I think because we saw this in the theater, this will work on the TV because we can kind of recall that experience. But, just the sound and the whoosh and just the large visual of you being immersed into the fall there, like, that was pretty crazy. I was seeing some advertisements. I guess maybe this was for Doomsday. I don't know if Spider-Man was shown in Infinity Vision, but like Infinity Vision, maybe it was. Honestly, it might have been filmed in Infinity Vision, but it's got like the side sort of expands the screen, makes it a little bit more immersive situation for the theater. And this and that would have been crazy. So it would have been really, really great camera work. But it really does, again, really immerse you into the Spider-Man feel of him going through the city. And they do, he is close up in a lot of his camera work throughout the movie here. And he does use a lot of slow motion as well, too. But, and I guess, there is a reference, I guess, to the end of the In the Spider-Verse, as New Rockstars points out here, where Gwen Stacy and Miles Morales are sitting at the end looking into the city as well. But, again, just them using that trope multiple times. I feel like the Into the Spider-Verse was obviously, the first one, somehow in 2018, the first one to utilize, the sort of upside down city situation. And, again, like, The Amazing Spider-Man was what, like 2012? So, it's been over 20 years since we have had, it's been over 20 years with the technology that we've had to, be able to do these Spider-Man scenes as well, too. So it's impressive that the Amazing Spider-Man, holds up to this as well. But, again, I think, with what they're able to do here with the camera work, like this is, really, 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 really great stuff. So I guess for me, it might be taking the crown as the favorite. There is a swinging scene with him and MJ. Some of the swinging scenes there maybe do get a little CGI at some point. I actually think maybe the swinging scenes with the person. So like when Andrew Garfield's swinging around with Emma Stone in hey, yo, what do we mean swinging with Emma Stone? Yo, but when Spider-Man is zipping through the city with Emma Stone there with Gwen Stacy, like it really does again seem like they are just like Spider-Man just zipping through the city. You don't really seem like they're like pasted on a green screen. The first time he takes MJ through the city, it does seem a little bit green screeny. But again, the first Tom Holland fall through the city is really really great. So that probably explains a lot of the close up stuff as well too. Is if they are a lot of obviously green screen heavy type stuff there. But like the jumping off the building and stuff earlier is really really immersive as well too. And I know a lot of the Spider-Man fans were excited to see the villains that we did get early on in the trailers and stuff, and just the anticipation for them in the movie there. So again, some good fan service as well. And this was a big section of the movie where I think a lot of the individual shots and stuff, freeze frames, were homages to different comic book covers and stuff as well. But yeah, rest in peace to Aunt May, of course, visiting the graveside. Really doing a great job, of course, of keeping the flowers up to date as well too. I don't know if they're of course, trying to continue to reinforce how much time is going by, but again, he's keeping them really fresh as well too. It's a weekly replacement for our guy Tom Holland here. Really putting in the work for keeping Aunt May looking good there. Even Aunt May always looking good. Even in the afterlife, Aunt May. I guess the Marvel. I guess we do have a pretty good sense of the Marvel afterlife. Again, obviously Peter Parker goes into the ancestral plane here a couple of times with an Aunt May vision. So I guess Aunt May. If we can just get into the ancestral plane, then maybe we can see what's going on with Aunt May at this time as well. But obviously the flowers. I guess take Aunt May flowers in the ancestral plane. Peter Parker thinks he's doing the work. Chad, he's just going to the gravestone. We're going into the ancestral plane, bringing Aunt May flowers and dinner and a movie. Hey yo, who's to say? But yeah, again, like we're saying, a lot of different comic book shots here as well. Tombstone did seem to be an interesting character. I guess he's still out there. He's just arrested. So if this is an Arkham Asylum situation, all of these guys can just break out, and then they can just have Tombstone be the villain of another movie as well. But that would be a fun villain to explore. We might have to do like the Wikipedia read up, the character biography on Tombstone. I think it might be the name as well too. I guess Kurt Russell's already been in this. Hey, and rest in peace to Val Kilmer. So Sam Elliott's gonna have to play Tombstone in the MCU. I'm a MCU superhero named Tombstone. I guess it's not really Sam. So I'm Sam Elliott. I'm Tombstone. Hey, Iron Man. I guess that's not really. All right, we'll work up our Sam Elliott and get back to you on that. I don't know if Marvel's gonna take our casting advice on that one there, but again, obviously Spider-Man with a great collection of people to combat against potentially in the future as well. The Hand getting a little bit of a shout out in this movie as well. Oh, Peter Parker doing laundry. The key to the city, chat. Hey, yo, I don't know. The key to the city to New York, I think maybe was a little bit of a curse there for a while. I guess, obviously they gave it to Spider-Man, instead of Peter Parker. So did they do this before or after Diddy? Hey, yo, which key to the city did Diddy get? I forget, because they like gave him the key to the city. I think that was like almost part of the setup as well too, because he got arrested right after that. It was like the second headline was Diddy got the key to the city. Oh, wait a second, never mind. Actually, open the key, goes to a jail cell. He's getting arrested. But Spider-Man was getting the key to the city there, and this was one of the moments where I realized that my attention to the greater MCU was slipping. But people talked about as well too at the time. It's like when Marvel was expanding all these properties, and the scene I'm looking at here is with him getting the key to the city, he's talking to the mayor. So apparently the mayor in this movie, in New York City at the time of the Spider-Man movie, got the mayor position in the Daredevil Born Again show. So I guess Wilson Fisk is, and again, this is based off the recap for New Rockstars, because I didn't watch the new Daredevil show. Obviously the old Daredevil show is so good that I just didn't want to, it is what it is. The new Daredevil show wasn't going to live up to it. Honestly, only by the factor that it was on Disney Plus and wasn't going to, maybe it is rated R, but it's just not the same thing. You're not going to take that much time off the show. It's like an NBA player. You can't just take 7 seasons off and then return and be the same. The show can't just take 7 seasons off and then just be the same show again. I don't think that's ever happened in history. So, Roseanne, but, again, a show just can't return like that. So, again, it wasn't going to be the same level of show. And I was like, the 3 seasons that I got were great. So, I wasn't going to step on those seasons. But, again, when it's like, how do Marvel fans keep up with all these properties? Like, do I have to watch this to understand this, to watch this, to understand this? And it's like, again, it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's like, you can explore that, and it's, that story's just there for you. It's like, oh, I didn't even know this was, this mayor had this whole backstory in Spider-Man, but, again, it's there for you in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as part of the greater picture. And you get to connect all these storylines in that way, but it doesn't hurt the story at all. If I don't know, again, respectfully, if I don't know the backstory of this mayor, it's just a scene that goes by. Or, again, it's a neat connection to the greater cinematic universe and shows the cohesiveness that is happening there. And, just again, shows, the containment that is going on. And there was also, like the reference throughout, which when there was, again, a lot of things that I think that Destin Daniel, I guess the screenwriters, the movie people borrowed from other Marvel things, Marvel things. Hey, and just saying our name out, but other Marvel things in, even an Easter egg type way. But, again, I don't think in like a, in a bad way. I just think there was some similarities to some other things that we have seen in some Marvel movies. But there was another situation as well too, where it's like, okay, even if you don't know what the greater backstory to this is, it was Frank and Tom Holland always talking about how Tom Holland saved Frank. Again, I don't even know if that has even been in like the Daredevil or the Punisher special or the Daredevil show or any other property. I could have missed that. Or it could just be like how Hawkeye and Black Widow were always talking about Budapest as well too. Like, it could just be that kind of mystery scenario that never gets revealed. But again, you don't have to know what that is, which of course, for a plot standpoint is kind of the point. But if it was explained in the Punisher show, it's like exactly what they're talking about. If not, it still works for the movie, because the point is, Spider-Man has this leverage moment over Punisher. It's not about necessarily knowing what the exact beats of the leverage moment is. But this was a moment for me where it's like, okay, I know I'm not keeping up with all the Marvel stuff, and I actually know that that's okay. Like, if I just go, watch the movies, when I go watch the movies, I think I can, be smart enough as a movie watcher to figure out what's going on here. Because, when obviously the Marvel first expanded into the TV shows and stuff, it's like, we got to watch every TV show. We're fans of all these characters and all this stuff. And, we were at that time as well, too. They obviously were having characters that you were familiar with. You had WandaVision. You had, of course, Loki. You had, I guess, again, I go Captain America at that time. All the Hawkeye as well too. I'm trying to remember, every show they did. But those, all of those shows are really well done. Even, though Loki maybe stands above those, all 4 of those shows I would have a good time rewatching again. Maybe I'm not just rushing to rewatch any TV shows, because like I've said, I'm more of a movie person than a TV show person just in general. But, again, all 4 of those shows are a really good time. But, obviously as they introduce new characters and as they have so many shows, and it's like, okay, well then, we're spinning off the TV shows now. So it's like, Wanda gets a spin-off show from the movies. So that's fun. We love Wanda. We love Scarlet Witch. Shout out to Elizabeth Olsen. She gets to have her own property. Vision, it's fun that we get to have that there. But then it's like, okay, now Agatha in the Wanda show is getting her spin-off show. And then maybe somebody in the Agatha show is going to have their spin-off show. It's like, I can't keep up with all this. But if they drop in a character in the movie, it's not going to ruin the movie. it's like, oh, that character's there, and maybe you can go access this whole world to the backstory, again, the greater cinematic universe, but you can still, obviously, and if the movie's well done too, that's obviously the point. But in the well done version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you can still have all of these, tremendous greater backstories for, just this mayor character that's in there for 2 seconds. So, because somebody at work was like, oh, we were talking about this, and they were like, oh, you know, I don't know if we want to go see the Spider-Man movie because, like, do we have to watch all these other movies to go see Spider-Man? It's like, I guess, you can, obviously, if you want to know, every single piece of every single character that's been in there. If you just want to go watch the Spider-Man movie, guess what? It's still gonna make sense because you can figure it out. You're a smart person. One, you have to basically figure out every movie plot that you ever watch because, you don't just go read the plot of the movie before you go watch it. I guess, that can't happen, of course. But, in theory, maybe you watch a trailer or two and know, like, okay, what's going on here. And obviously, again, Marvel is on the extreme side of, breaking down every possibility for what could happen going into the movie. But yes, most movies, you just figure out what's happening as you watch it. So it turns out with Marvel movies, that's the same thing. And if you don't know every, if I don't know the mayor's backstory, if I don't know this if I don't know if this person standing to the left of the mayor was like, in, the Punisher, had a one night stand with the Punisher. I guess, we don't have to, make those assumptions, but I don't have to know every single backstory here, and the movie can still work. So I was like, that, hey, that means I can watch way less Marvel and still make sense. But it's like, you don't have to be worried about keeping up with everything. You can watch the properties. You can, hot take. You can watch the characters you want to see, and it works out just fine. And you can be an intelligent movie person, and make it work. If you can't figure out the plot to a movie, anyways, again, either the movie was not, well made, or you're just more of a set piece fan, I guess is really what it is. So, again, obviously this movie was well made, and there are those expanded elements that you can, look into as well. Again, Peter Parker just doing laundry in the apartment, shout out 5 years, nobody ever wandered down. He just, like, never just, like, took a pee, like, while he was laundering, and then, like, wandered back, and there's just, like, somebody standing there, like, oh, that Spider-Man's costume? And there, again, of course, you could just get away with the cosplay element as well, too. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm washing my Spider-Man costume. But, that would definitely be a situation as well, because he does break back into the laundry room, and, of course, I guess it is being used at that time. So is that, I guess, did he, like, he must have bought a unit and put it up in his room, but again, then it's going as well, too. And he's using a lot of electricity in this unit. Like, is there ever a moment where he just, like, shorts out the whole building? Like, Monday Night Football's going. It's like, I don't know why I was thinking about Eli Manning on the Giants for Monday Night Football. I guess because they, Eli's also on Monday Night Football now as a broadcaster as well, too. But if it's ever just like, college football playoffs, Clemson's driving for the national championship, and then Spider-Man just cuts the entire building's power due to an experiment. Like, it's had to happen a couple of times. So I don't know what his excuse is there for those type of events. But again, if he's also got a whole washing machine up in this upper unit as well, too. And obviously, any filmmaking living space is usually going to be bigger than what it can actually be in real life. Like, there's so much empty space here. They got Spider-Man sitting on the couch. Like, there's so much empty space behind him in this apartment. Like, yes, he would need Tony Stark to fund this apartment for him. But just the amount of, wattage that he's using, he's going to have to install extra outlets all over. Like, the amount of extension cords and power strips he's running. That's the thing. He's going to have to run. There's, this is an upstairs attic. Like, this thing's probably got like 6 different wall plugins, and then they each have 2 different plugins. So he's got like 12 different areas that he can plug into the wall. Pause. And like, 4 of those, again, he's got like 2 phone chargers and 3 computer chargers just, right away. So, take that off the list. And, again, so everything is going to be running into power strips. So every power strip is going to trip out like, once a week. And then probably once a month, all of the power strips are going to trip out, and he's going to have to go down to the basement and reset all the breakers and everything, and the building's going to hate him as well. So really, his best bet is honestly to rent out an entire apartment complex, with Stark funding, but obviously he can't do that now because, they don't remember him as well. But the thing would be, like, there would still be that connection to Peter, or that connection to Spider-Man, though. So you think maybe that he could access some type of it's like, do the Avengers have some type of superhero welfare that, Spider-Man's getting on? Maybe he's having that. Maybe there's some type of just Spider-Man stipend they're sending him, but they're not, it's like they don't require like his ID. They just kind of are like, "Oh yeah, we have it." But they would know. I guess they never get into that. Like the Department of Damage Control, I guess again they have everybody memorized, but there's no, or everybody did forget. But does that mean everybody has to stay forgetting? I guess not, because like MJ now knows that he's Peter Parker. She doesn't just keep forgetting. Like Ned, it's not like he's gonna be the guy from Memento. Like Ned's gonna have to get tattooed on his body, like Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Then every day Ned wakes up and tries to he's like, "What's this on my chest?" And like tries to wipe it off, and then he looks in the mirror and he's like, "Peter Parker is Spider-Man." It's like, what is going on here? Again, I think he stays remembering after once he accesses the memory, it like locks into place. I think is sort of the scientific explanation there for how that works. But again, for damage control, they could definitely learn who he is, and Jean Grey learns who he is as well too. I was like, did we say spoiler alert? We did say spoiler earlier. Spoiler alert again, I guess, if we haven't yet. In a while, and if you're just jumping on and joining us, spoiler alert. And Jean Grey does learn his identity as well. So damage control, you would like, the ability to track him down again is still out there, and again, they would be the one of anyways the departments that would be concerned with trying to uncover his identity anyways. Like, again, the average, once Zendaya, once they erase her memory, like Ned, I guess you do have the connection, of course, of the fact that he had the personal debt to Spider-Man. Spider-Man saved him a couple times, but again, anybody else that remember, I guess he didn't reveal his memory to anybody else. I guess like the Flash Thompson kid, like if Flash Thompson, knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, like again, he has no reason to make the association obviously afterwards. It just is not, he's totally reset at that point. Obviously, as Zendaya brutally reminds, Peter Parker, Tom Holland, later on in the movie. So, but again, like he's going to have no reason to pursue it outside of the interest of just who is Spider-Man. But damage control is like making it their job, obviously, to learn the information about these superheroes. So they would be actively trying to uncover his identity. It probably would have been in his file, if we're being honest. And again, they're probably going to easily track down the power. They're like, okay, which apartment is just using 65 million megawatts of electricity? They're like, okay, just pull out New York electricity grid, and then power. What do you say? Like the bills, like the electric statements for every month. They're like, okay, this apartment's electrical statement does not match the the average input for what is going on here, unless he's got some kind of deal with the electrical company. Or, again, maybe he has one couple of pieces of tech left over from the Stark era that he can use. Like maybe I guess if he did have some type of mini arc reactor, that would obviously be really, really helpful. Hey, they could really, get him through a lot of stuff there. But I think they could track him down. They're being like, okay, how much gigawatts would it take to run Spider-Man's operation? Oh wait, Peter Parker rents out that apartment. I think we have a good lead on what's going on here. Because, again, there's nobody else in New York City that's going to be as techie as Spider-Man as well too, that's not already associated with the Avengers. Like if Daredevil is operating in Hell's Kitchen, like he doesn't have the power demands of Spider-Man as well. He's just beating guys up and just tracking guys down. He's not rigging up his costume as well. I don't even know who. I'm trying to remember who makes his costume in the show. Who it's just like leather, right? He just like goes to a biker gang. He's like, you got any red leather left over? He's like, I'm thinking about a red leather costume. And like, we got you, buddy. Hell's Angels, we'll cook up something for you. But again, early on, he's just got like he's got like a do rag and a black sweater. It's just like a blind guy in a do rag beating people up. So he doesn't like plugging things into his apartment. I think his apartment is actually the complete opposite. He's got nothing as an apartment in Daredevil. And I don't know, like, who else is in New York, again, non-associated with a group at that time. Because Iron Man is, rest in peace. Pour one out for Iron Man. He's passed away. Fantastic Four haven't arrived yet as well. I guess I don't know. I think, is Captain America, I have to go back and watch the show. Is he, like, in Louisiana as well? I'm not, cancel me now for saying that. But I think they do have a scene where he goes, doesn't he, like, go to, I'm trying to remember when he goes back home. Is that where he goes? and then he can't get a loan. I don't remember exactly. Again, we have to go back and rewatch the show there. But again, for like we're saying, for damage control, I think they would have maybe figured something out. As well. So we'll have to see how the identity goes throughout. And I guess now, like we're saying, his friend group is back at the end of this one. I guess he doesn't reveal his identity to any of the other superheroes as well. But like even like we're saying, Robert Downey Jr. tracked him down the first time, and I guess we don't know where Nick Fury is at this point. Like we literally he's just completely disappeared from the MCU. Like they didn't even have to write. Like I guess if Nick Fury never returns, it would almost kind of make sense. I'd be like, oh yeah, I guess he just kind of figured out how to go into hiding. At some point, he just decided to retire, and they can never find him, and he's just somehow so good at avoiding every single superhero ever. It kind of makes sense. But again, he I guess is in space at this point. But you assume if Nick Fury got back on Earth, he could probably track down Spider-Man in a good 10 days. I would assume he would probably have Peter Parker's identity locked in, and then halfway through the second trilogy movie, the halfway through the sixth Spider-Man movie, I guess, or no, wait, the fifth. Halfway through the fifth Spider-Man movie, Nick Fury's wandering back in like, Spider-Man, we need you. Also, again, not the Nick Fury voice as well, too. Definitely much more like, lower pitch. He's not really like doing Jules a lot of the time as Nick Fury. It's sometimes, well, I guess, sometimes he's just always doing Samuel L. as well, too. Pause. But, either way, he is trackable. So and he's like on social, like Peter Parker is just actively on social. That's the thing, we don't know like Peter Parker's social pseudonym as well. He would have to be on there under some sort of fake name, some fake identity situation. But again, I haven't set up an Instagram account in a long time. Like, does he what does he need to go get his ID for his Instagram account? So we'd have to go see what is going on there. Or if Ned's public, maybe he can just go look at Ned's Instagram either way as well. But again, that goes back to our posting Zendaya theory as well. That's how he probably found Ned on Instagram, if we're being honest. Tom Holland just scrolling Instagram one night and he's like, no way, MJ's in my algorithm, Zendaya's in my algorithm. And also Tom Holland, they new Rockstar's pointing out that there is a beer product placement for his own, I guess, non-alcoholic beer. But Tom Holland taking game from everybody around him. He said he was learning from Chris Nolan on the Odyssey. It looks like he might have also learned from Ryan Reynolds at some point as well too. I guess, and Hugh Jackman, the Rock, any of the great actors. The great three actors you want to model your game after. We always say it's Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, and the Rock. That would be like that'd be an interesting actor. Like good in a box office, can sing, I guess those are the two main things that they sell a lot of movies and they sing, and they can play a superhero, but the movie's probably not going to be great. But obviously, again, they're going to make a lot of money. It is what it is. But we do see, I guess, the Peter Parker, some of the transformation stuff starting as well too. They're planting the seeds of obviously it being a little bit of like, well, it is tied into it. Like his transformation is literally tied to like the workplace stress. So, it is a little bit of, kind of like setting it up like, oh, is it just that? And then obviously it's both things. Like he is feeling sick because, he's changing, but also pause. Whoa, hey, spider puberty. But, also he's going through spider puberty because, again, he's isolated, I guess, at this point. But, I guess Michael Mann would have been proud of Destin Daniel Cretton's version of Spider-Man. Very, very focused on like obsession and, just the level at which somebody will go to be the best at their craft in some ways. Michael Mann would have loved the pill popping scene early on. He probably would have had that. The thing is, Michael Mann definitely would have had Tom Holland talking to the girl in the elevator though in his movie. Like that's probably honestly scene 2. Like he probably hooks up with the girl in the elevator and then pops a pill and then has to, and then honestly Michael Mann is jealous that he didn't have somebody like literally turn into a spider because they were so obsessed with their job. He's like, I can't believe I didn't make a movie about like a hunter that just turned. He's like a hunter that just turned into a lion. Oh, that would be interesting. Like if he just like started just like living with the lions, or like the wolves. I guess it would be wolves, right? Like that would be kind of the more common one. I feel like you would see like people living with. You hear like oh he was raised, I guess, like raised by wolves is the saying or something, but or like the Baby Keem song. But if it was like that, would be the Michael Mann movie. Would be some hunter that goes out into the woods to like hunt wolves, but just becomes obsessed with the wolves, just becomes a wolf. I guess I don't, maybe a later stage Michael Mann movie, but that's kind of what Spider-Man. That's literally the Spider-Man story here. You laugh and say, "Oh, that's ridiculous, silly Michael Mann. Why would he make that movie? A guy would never turn into a wolf while hunting a wolf." Well, Spider-Man, I mean, he got bit by a radioactive spider, and it did kickstart the process. But he literally did turn into a spider chasing people. So there is some precedent there. I guess Wolfman, chat. Oh, werewolf. This might be the plot to Robert Eggers' Werewolf. Who's to say whoever plays werewolf is? I was gonna say it's not Willem Dafoe. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson's playing werewolf. He starts off as a normal guy hunting werewolves, and then obviously becomes a werewolf. I guess that would happen because you would get attacked by one if you were hunting them. But we get a little Whitney Houston drop in the movie as well too. Of course, love to see it. Obviously it would make sense as well too if you're gonna just like what are the odds of who you're gonna run into as an artist just on the street, just in a car. Like, what are the odds of who's playing? Of course, it's the stats do say, according to the sales, it's either Michael or Whitney. Those are the top two. So again, makes sense there. But modern day too. Obviously, you love to see it. Sirius XM. It was a bit of a middle-aged gentleman, so a '90s fan for sure. Again, if Tom Holland swings on top of like a younger person's car, maybe I don't know if they queue up like Dua Lipa or SZA or something like that. They're like, "We gotcha," and then like Kill Bill, like they throw Kill Bill on or something like that. I don't know, but Luther maybe gets a little too chill for that moment. I think maybe again, SZA, she does have real like I guess, and so does Whitney Houston as well too. But she doesn't really have like the dance tracks that Whitney Houston does. I could be wrong there, and I'm gonna have to go through the features. Like I guess she does. Well, she does have the features with Drake. So like Rich Baby Daddy, of course, I don't know if like again her features on the songs are more like a dance part of the feature per se, but the beat is obviously a dancey beat, and she floats over there. But for herself, I don't think she has the dance songs the way that Whitney does. And obviously, as R&B evolves a little bit, obviously maybe SZA's R&B sound is a little bit more, hip hop focused ish as well too. It's a little, it's a little bit more modern than obviously Whitney's is more, obviously grounded in the 80s and 90s sounds of an era in some ways, timeless of an era, of course, it's the best of. But, it is distinct in, the production from SZA. But again, I do think like the emotional, what the emotional core of the bulk of their music was, and is for SZA, kind of the same. But again, like Kill Bill is not, and Kill Bill is, again, a song like you would hear, you still would hear SZA songs, slash, do, I'm not saying you don't anymore. I'm just saying like, in the moment dropping it being at the peak of his powers, like you'd still like obviously hear Kill Bill out all the time. But it's not like I want to dance with somebody or something like that. And I guess technically I'm Every Woman is a cover as well too. But even still, it's not necessarily again like that type of a. It doesn't like inspire that type of rhythm. Again, it obviously does inspire rhythm, I guess, but not the same type of just the same, just that ultimate like let loose dancing that you can just get with 90s R&B. I guess for us it's more internal, internal let loose dancing. It doesn't necessarily manifest externally for us actually letting loose to dance, but internally, it's just that feeling where it's like, oh yeah, I'm really dancing right now. I guess we can't say inside. That's kind of a pause, but you're like, you're like in my mind, you're like, boy, I'm really lighting up the dance floor right now, but I'm chilling over here in the corner as well too. That's really the best of both worlds for us. But either way, like we're saying, obviously, shout out to Whitney as well too. And then Spider-Man at one point he's obviously got this tank that he's trying to keep from going through the city here, and this is another thing that, again, a little similar to some of the stuff that we've seen in other Marvel movies. Like in Homecoming, they have the great iconic scene where he stretches out, and maybe that pays homage to the Tobey Maguire as well too. Again, I don't go back as much to the Tobey Maguire ones as maybe we would. If I do queue up a Spider-Man movie, again, it is what it is. We're, like we said, Amazing Spider-Man fans, but they maybe have some sort of Tobey Maguire, like, pulling together something, or, using the spider webs to block something off. But this does remind me of Homecoming scene where he is like, is it a boat? I think he's kind of pulling the boat together. So, it's more the aesthetics of how he's using the webs than, again, what he is functionally doing here, because he's not pulling the tank together. But he's using that sort of stretched out, using the webs and then his body kind of anchoring in the middle there, so that stretched out factor to pause, to, stop the tank there. Hey, yo. But he does get the tank to turn right before it hits a bus, and then he slams into the window of the bus. And sitting in the bus, we got all the classic, the teen with the headphones. They don't know what's going on. But I don't think it's the headphones that's keeping this teen distracted. I think it's this Jets jersey that the teen is wearing, because, if you're a Jets fan, that's like the one thing that's more traumatic than the MCU, the entire MCU. She just doesn't care. She's like, yes, I guess I almost called him Severant. What's the name of the villain in Thunderbolts? I guess Severant's another name out there. Maybe Omega Buster can fight Severant, but I forget what his name is. But again, not Severance. We're just gonna call him Severance, I guess, because that's the only thing I can think of. But the Severance villain from Thunderbolts, obviously he's there. Loki attacks New York City. Again, every bad thing that's ever happened in the MCU has happened to New York City. Like, literally, Boston's fine, Philly's fine, literally every other East Coast city's fine, New Jersey's fine, but the Manhattan just gets decimated every time. It is what it is. Manhattan's the worst. Every year it just gets ranked the worst city. Actually, it was starting to improve a little bit. Post blip, it took a minute to rebound, but they rebuilded the reconstruction, all different stuff, and they were starting to get back up the rankings. It's like, oh, Manhattan cracks the top 20 for the first time post blips. Best places to live. And then, Severance from Thunderbolts just rips through and just, not Sentinel, Sentinel, Sentient, something along those lines. Oh, we're getting closer, chat. We'll figure it out. Maybe it is Sentinel. Seminole, the Florida State Seminole from the Thunderbolts. Was it Deion Sanders? I forget who the villain was there. I guess Deion wouldn't be the villain, but I guess the Florida State's like had some likable players. Like, I can't think of a villain player from Florida State that I would like really, I guess, dislike. Or I guess like Dalvin Cook did cook up Michigan in a bowl game, so maybe Dalvin Cook would be, like the most villainous Florida State performance that we've had against us. But again, I kind of like Dalvin Cook's game at the time as well too, so that that hurt. But pause. But what are we saying? If you're a Jets fan in the MCU, that's the only thing more traumatic than actually living in Manhattan in the MCU. You're just like, well, the Jets have no quarterback. I don't care about the fact that just, Thanos can snap away everybody, because maybe that actually helps the Jets get a quarterback. It actually just eliminates half the people. It's like, okay, now that's like the nihilism that you have at that point. They're like, the Jets will still somehow manage this. The Jets have, half as many people to choose from, and somehow they still can't pick a quarterback. The headlines on ESPN after that time would be, Stephen A's takes after the blip, where he's like, the Thanos just snapped away half the QB class. The Jets have been debating this entire time. Thanos snaps away the one quarterback, and somehow they take the other one. I don't know what happened there. Somehow they take the Jets would take the quarterback that got snapped away. We don't know exactly when that happened, but they did drop, I think, if I remember correctly, they did drop Avengers. I guess maybe both Avengers were kind of in the spring, but was Avengers Infinity War in April? So it might have been like right before or after the NFL draft. So the Jets like take, I don't know, I guess post blip it wouldn't have been Geno Smith. But maybe in this universe it's like Cade Klubnik's a good quarterback. That's tough. Sorry to Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik is a good quarterback in our universe as well too. But I guess I'm just thinking of the other universes out there where maybe he didn't live up to the 5-star hype. But either way, for the Jets, they're like, oh, we got. Who did the Jets just take somebody at quarterback? I feel like they have, or they didn't. The Jets just have nobody right now. I don't know. But Tyler Huntley, who is the Jets quarterback? Again, we have off-season update episode in the future here, but we'll see early who is the Jets QB. This is bad, chat. This is bad. Oh, they did bring Geno Smith back? No way. And they do have Cade Klubnik. Wow. That was either a subconscious poll or the craziest luck we've ever had. I guess that probably is. If that's the craziest luck we've ever had. But, it's a lucky guess, for sure. Bailey Zappi, honestly, is the most intriguing name here. if we're being honest, I guess Bailey Zappi hasn't had like the most NFL success. Geno Smith has been good, but I don't know if like Geno Smith is in the prime of his career anymore. Brady Cook was who I was thinking of. I think was just like when I said they had nobody, I was like, who are they gonna start? Brady Cook, but I guess they did draft Cade Klubnik this year. So it'd be like again if they drafted Cade Klubnik in the first round, they drafted him in the fourth round. So they took him with the fourth pick, and then he just gets snapped away. So we'll see if he does get snapped away again. Some of that 5-star rating maybe he did, but Chad, we don't want that. We don't want that. But either way, the Jets fans in the MCU, they feel nothing. They're just like Spider-Man saving a tank from. They're like Spider-Man. Can you? What are you doing saving the city? Can you play quarterback? That'll save the city. But again, if this was a Brunson jersey, that would obviously be painful PTSD. Again, Spider-Man at point guard would be different, but Spider-Man at quarterback, and I guess maybe more of like a Kyle. I guess can we compare him to Kyler Murray, like a Fran Tarkington type, maybe like an extra, like if Fran Tarkington had superpowers, is the basic comparison that you would make there. But obviously the like we're saying, the Jets fans would be numb to it. And the Jets fans, again, the New York fans are passionate about those teams. That's what matters. Like the sneaky little, not the sneaky thing. Like obviously, you would say that a blank statement, every city would be passionate about their fan base, but that's not like, again, not every city is as passionate. Like, I guess not every city again has been in as big of these droughts as maybe New York has, and some of these franchises haven't been around that long as well too, like the Charlotte, Houston Texans, Charlotte Panthers if we're talking from a football standpoint, Charlotte Hornets as well too from a basketball standpoint. But either way, like do certain cities make up, if better way to put it, but do certain cities make as big of a fuss of their team if they're not as winning as much as say the New York teams do? Like the Brooklyn Nets being a bad team per se, being a team with a losing record year to year, I guess what's a better way to say it? But again, if like the Brooklyn Nets are struggling, like it's something to talk about in the NBA, if that's the talking point. But again, it's not like you feel the lack of the Brooklyn Nets success in the NBA. Like you feel the lack of the Knicks success in the NBA when it happens, because again, you feel the Knicks fans talking about it. You feel the presence of the lack of championships. But Brooklyn's losing. It's like, oh, there's Brooklyn top of the draft every year. Even again, I don't want to. I feel like Brooklyn's the one we can call out because it's the double team. Maybe like the Clippers as well too. Obviously, obviously the little brother teams are the easiest one to pick on there in their city. But again, there are just some that don't have that same level of impact. So again, it just, if it was like an Orlando Magic jersey or something, like it would still like make sense to an NBA fan. But the absolute numbing trauma of being a sports fan, like being a Jets fan, is obviously way more impactful than some of the other ones. And of course, the Punisher shows up here early on as well too. And another big winner of this movie is Bernthal. Again, obviously, Bernthal, anytime he shows up in a movie is a win. But just as his Punisher character as well too, the translation of that onto the big screen was a major success. Again, obviously a PG-13 movie and a Spider-Man movie as well too, so you're probably going to be a little, again, maybe some of the humor maybe not so light, but weirdly enough. But again, for what the Punisher is doing, like it's definitely going to be the most sanitized version of the Punisher, and then probably the most sanitized version movie Punisher as well too, like we're saying on top of that. Like if Punisher is in, I guess none of the other movies feel like more vile than Spider-Man, but maybe there is like again one more curse word in another movie or so. Like if it's the Captain America, if it's the Iron Man franchise, like he definitely says an F-bomb and probably makes a couple more crude jokes. If it's like the early Iron Man franchise, I guess that would be like kind of the one more crass franchise that we've had. But hey, Iron Man, cool it. But the kids are watching. But again, the Punisher, this version of the Punisher, still obviously is really, really effective. I mean, again, it's one of those things. If you're comparing Marvel to itself, is that fair to do? Like, is it fair to compare a PG-13 Punisher to a fully unleashed, R-rated Punisher? It's probably not. And again, the Punisher, specifically, of course, the Punisher in season 2 of Daredevil. Again, in my lack of watching TV shows, Daredevil is the only one of those MCU shows from Netflix that I've seen. But of course, you get the Punisher, like we're saying, as a huge storyline introduction in season 2. And there's just so many great sequences with there. Obviously, the prison fight is a big standout, but the rooftop scenes with him and Daredevil, like there, any of the dialogue scenes. Obviously, Bernthal is a breakout star in that moment there. But you're not going to get that same sort of gritty Punisher here. So how does that translate work? And you still, he still feels like a distinct Punisher type character. Like he really does feel like a comic booky type character. And again, it is impressive sometimes. Like I don't even know comic books, but you're just like, I get the sense of that there. And of course, in the comics you can still like unleash the Punisher, but just in, I guess, the translation of what that would mean in the movie sense, like the more comical version of it, just the more sanitized version of it, you did feel like he was a more a grittier type guy. But again, just not the same sort of PG-13, the most vile, the most gory superhero that we've had, just cutting guys' throats and getting having the whole prison just having guys just bleeding on him the whole time when he's running through there. And I guess again, is he the most gory superhero? But again, just obviously a more vile, I guess I've used that word 17 times, but just a more again, aggressively gruesome superhero that we've had. But it still really was effective. Again, obviously, do I personally like other Punisher better? Of course. But it still really did work. And Bernthal, I guess, what worked, of course, like I'm saying, is Bernthal. Bernthal really works. That's what works. I don't, does the Punisher himself, 100% work? I mean, he does, but it is because Bernthal is so good as the character there and really does have that portrayal locked in. And, maybe that was like a little bit of a minor audition. Again, I guess that Endgame, or I guess that what we're saying, Doomsday is what it is at this point as a movie. Like they're not going to go in and rewrite Punisher to have a major storyline. But the point is, like, Bernthal is there to have as an actor if you need him to be a little, if you need other people to be more important in future movies as supporting characters. Again, even if the Punisher might not be a guy that you're able to drive big Marvel storylines through, I mean, they could rewrite stuff obviously and mirror things that other characters did with Punisher. But again, he can also be a driver. Like, I guess I wasn't thinking about this comparison before, but maybe a little like Peter Quill in some ways in the latest in the last version of the MCU, where again, Peter Quill was never going to be the main story guy compared to Iron Man and Captain America, but obviously his connection to Thanos did give him some more relevance in Infinity War, and he does become really, really important, obviously, with just the ripple effects of his decision, but that does give him some more screen time. He's like, counter planning versus Iron Man there, so he's playing off Robert Downey Jr. Like, Bernthal can be in that role. Like, obviously, he could be in that role playing off of Tom Holland, but, Benedict Cumberbatch as well, too. If Doctor Strange, if it's like Tom Holland and Doctor Strange and Pedro Pascal, and they're the leaders of the Avengers, hey, a little bit different. But even with Captain America back, or, even going up against Doctor Doom or something, and, there is obviously that world that the battle world, but there is that scenario that Doctor Doom is, of course, what do you say, like an anti-hero more so than a straight villain? Like, is he going to be an agent of chaos like the Joker? Or like we're saying in the attempt that they just redo Infinity War, is he that broken hero that you say, but that broken guy trying to save his planet in a sense, or a guy trying to save his planet in a broken way is maybe the better way to phrase it. Because going back to the trailer, of course, there is that statement of him saying, like, at the end of the day, we will be faced with an unthinkable decision. And I think really this maybe is, again, obviously crediting like New Rockstars, and other places, going through the trailers, helping prompt our minds, and, obviously them laying out their own points as well, too. But that just has to be, him referencing an incursion and them, figuring out kind of maybe like what timeline they're going to just live in. Essentially, like, who's going to live, what's going to happen, can we jump everybody over to this timeline? I don't know if, I'm saying it comic-wise the right way. But, again, I don't know if Doctor Doom is... And that almost, again, makes me think, is Doctor Doom less of a villain than Thanos in some ways? Is he going to be, again, more just about the... Is that almost more of an unavoidable choice? Because, again, like, an incursion is, like... I guess, if the choice is like, do you stop in an incursion or do we just all go, live on this one timeline? I guess, again, you stop the incursion versus, making the choice of, who lives or dies. But, again, if the incursion is just sort of this natural event and you have to, figure out how to plan this out the best you can, then again, that just becomes a different type of tragedy than Thanos. And I guess this does go to something that actually we can actually connect this to the movie, thankfully. Because we were definitely getting off on a doomsday trail there, but we can actually connect this to the movie because they do ask the question to Ruffalo's character about to Bruce Banner there about whether or not, the one girl's like, oh, if Thanos was obviously, so worried about overpopulation, why didn't you just make more food? It's like, yes, that's 100% true. Thanos was the villain of the movie. So yeah, he's a bad guy. If he was trying to make more food, the Avengers would not have been, gotten together to stop him. The Avengers would probably have sought him out and been like, yes, come, make more food over here, please, because we eat a lot in America. But the Avengers like their shawarma. But again, they would not. It does change the plot of the movie. Like, Bruce Banner, I don't know why he had to have Hulk smash, answer that question. It does honestly make me, I don't want to say like question Bruce Banner's intelligence, but it is pretty simple. It's like, yes, if Thanos had made more food, he would not have been a bad guy, and the Avengers would not have gotten together to stop him, and, that would have been a much more responsible use of the power, for sure. But because he assembled the stones, well, that's how Infinity War happens, and that's how Endgame happens. You see, when he did assemble the stones, he used them poorly, and because he used them poorly, the Avengers had to stop him. But yeah, hey, not to comic book nerd you out there, but I guess we'll just have to we'll step up to the philosophical debate for Dr. Bruce Banner. It is what it is. And to be honest, again, Banner is a little, speaking of Rocky Balboa, Banner is a little in the Balboa camp of the way the character, do we call it the anti-character progression over the course of the movies? There was a character arc, of course. Rocky maybe did get progressively a little more illiterate over the course of the movies. Banner does seem to be taking a step back. Like, Banner was like kind of like, again, like a broken down, like he was definitely, like Ruffalo was definitely playing more in that TV show style of Banner in the original Avengers movies, where he's kind of like that lost, wandering scientist guy. Like, in the old TV show, he's just like kind of like, just hooking up with he just like gets on Tinder every town he goes into, and then like hooks up with some girl on Tinder, and then was like, oh, actually, I'm the Hulk. We shouldn't have done that. I'm going to get you into trouble. And then has to save her, and then goes to the next town, and then gets on Tinder again, and, keeps going that way. But, he was playing that kind of like, brooding, I don't know, brooding's the right word there, but, just that like that kind of, just like we're saying, low key, always, like you're saying, like always secretly angry scientist. Now he's just kind of like this bumbling guy in some ways, like this bumbling scientist who like is just completely out of control. The Hulk, like, again, he was totally in control in the first Avengers. So I don't know what, like, I guess, like the Natasha stuff really, like, I hate to say it, but shout out. Well, I guess I don't hate to say it. I was gonna hate to say it, but then I remember, we can reference John Witherspoon and Boomerang, so I don't hate to say it because we love to reference John Witherspoon. But he does he get a little pee whipped, by Black Widow? I don't know. I honestly don't know what happens to him. I don't know what happens to him. But there's a look that he gives Spider-Man when Spider-Man and him are walking around campus, and he's talking to Banner, and we're getting out of order here for the movie as well too, but it doesn't matter. But when he's walking around campus talking to Banner, he's Banner like gives him this look, like he's like, oh, you don't want to make that to get all the mutants, do you? Like, oh, you're gonna kill all the mutants if you make that device. And it's like, Bruce, it's like, what is Ruffalo doing? Like, it's almost like he is like, to speak of Al Pacino, like, of course Pacino, infamously wins the Oscar finally in his career for Scent of a Woman, but kind of becomes the Scent of a Woman guy throughout the rest of his career in some ways. I guess, he just keeps doing cocaine throughout, but, he kind of, and, all actors do this in some ways, they kind of stereotype themselves. Like, it seems like Ruffalo has, like, stereotyped different versions of a different character he's been. Like, and he was, like, a more serious, and he just played in Task a couple of, he was just in Task a year ago as well too. So there is like a seriousness that he can still get to, but he's been in like these am I saying his name right? Yargos Larthimer, Yargar Slythermers. Who made Poor Things, Chad? I don't think it was Yargar Slythermers, but let's look up Mark Ruffalo here and see what is going on. Yeah, he was just in like rom-coms and stuff. Like he was just like, either playing like he doesn't play like a normal guy anymore. It seems like he plays like something weird. And that gets into his, and that's getting a little bit into his Bruce Banner as well. Pause. But, and I guess, a lot of Marvel stuff as well too. This is an interesting filmography here lately, chat. Hey, yo. I mean, all the way Thor, Ragnarok, Infinity War, Captain Marvel, Endgame, Dark Waters, Shang-Chi, The Atom Project, Poor Things, Mickey 17, Arco, Cracking the Code, Philip Sharp, and the Biotech Revolution. Oh, it's a documentary. Now You See Me, Now You Don't, Crime 101. So Crime 101 is like him, like, that's like what he could have been doing his entire career, is roles like that. And like that's kind of what he started doing, like with Collateral and some of this stuff as well too. Like what happened to him being like a slicked back haired detective in Collateral? Like he had 13 going on 30 and Eternal Sunshine. I mean, 04 Ruffalo was cooking, Chad. Hey, yo. And now we've got 2025 or 2026. I guess, Crime 101 and Brand New Day is pretty good. We can't be mad about that. Being Human, I guess, starring Judith Human alongside Mark Ruffalo. I feel like I have maybe seen something about this. We'll have to look into that a little bit more. And then what's Good Sex, chat? Hey, yo. Natalie Portman, Mark Ruffalo, Tucker Pillsbury. Is this a real person? Tucker Pillsbury? Tremel Tillman, who was also in this Spider-Man movie as well, too, as the director of the Damage Control. I'm forgetting his name at the moment in the movie, what his character name is. But Tremel Tillman is the actor there, so it looks like him and Ruffalo, I guess, are paired back up in Good Sex. Hey, yo. But what is this movie? And Rashida Jones? Okay, Rashida Jones, it gets the click. That's the golden buzzer right there. After spending a decade in a failed relationship, pragmatic couples therapist Allie is turning 40 and reluctantly dipping her toe back into the New York dating scene. Oh, so Ruffalo might be playing the Hulk in this. Who's to say? She's in New York, but she gets more than she bargained for. Oh, so it is the Hulk. When she meets two men, one in his 20s and one in his 50s, who show her there is no set formula for good sex. I was going to say, I feel like they've made this movie before, chat. Hey, yo. Somebody in the city meets a couple guys. Lena Dunham is the auteur of this movie, writing and directing. So, and I guess Natalie Coleman, producing as well, too. So, she meets, I guess Tucker Pillsbury is the other guy, right? Oh, so he's like, what? He's like a punk rocker? Hey, yo, and then Ruffalo's like kind of like a charming businessman. So hopefully Ruffalo plays like a normal rom-com guy. So is Ruffalo kind of like getting back to, fun movies again? Hey, yo, Crime 101 and Good Sex? Hey, yo, why not? But, again, it was definitely, it seemed a little weird there for a second. I guess Spotlight in 2015, mainly Poor Things is what I'm thinking of. Yorgos Lanthimos. Or Yorgos Lanthimos, if I'm saying it right, based on a novel. So it has seemed like maybe there was a little bit of the Mickey 17 into the performance of course. But even in Ragnarok and Infinity War as well too, maybe that was just the again, if we were talking about how characters have been reset over their career, maybe this is one that got reset in a little bit of a way that I don't know if has been super beneficial for the character. Because I gotta be honest, like I do really like the portrayal of Mark Ruffalo's Hulk earlier on, and this is another admittance we got to make as well too. And also, I guess shout out to Billy Buckets. We hate to expose you here live on the pod, but we have been talking about the fact that maybe he does. Somebody in our friend group named Billy Buckets. Hey yo, from birth, it is what it is. They named him Buckets. Shout out because he gets buckets. It is what it is. But he's a baller, check. But he likes the Hulk movie. That's his one miss. No, but I've been trying to get him to admit how much he likes the Hulk movie because he's always like, it's good. But it's like, no, I can tell. I can tell when you like a movie, and I can tell you like the Hulk. And we finally got him to admit that he loves the Hulk movie. And you know what? Maybe we're just like, it's just one of those things. It's just a reflection of kind of how we're feeling at the moment because the Hulk's been free on YouTube and we've been queuing it up a couple times. It is what it is, and you know what? Chad is pretty good. Hey yo. Is the Hulk a top 10 MCU movie? We might be redoing the rankings. But you know what? Edward Norton's a good Hulk. Hey, yo, it is what it is. I don't know if Ruffalo is like, moving up the Hulk rankings, but Ruffalo is again like looking at the list, like he's appearing in a lot of performances. So a lot of movies as Hulk. So as I mean, as he is the Hulk right now. But I wouldn't mind him maybe trying to get back a little bit to the actual like old school. And you know what? I did actually like we did sneaky watch a little bit of the Hulk show growing up. It wasn't like the main show in rotation, but there was a stretch there where and Me TV's still going. So I think it's a relevant shout out Me TV, shout out Me TV. But there was a moment where they had, I want to say it was Saturday night, and I think maybe because it was a Saturday night superhero lineup, that's what it was. I think they had the Hulk and then Batman, the Adam West Batman, maybe programmed back to back, and maybe there was one other show in there as well too. But I don't think it was Superman. It would have been something else. But they definitely, I want to say, definitely had the Hulk in in Batman back to back. I guess we can just like look that up now as well too. It turns out you can look up anything, but we could probably just find the Me TV schedule for when the Hulk ran on Saturday nights. But I remember watching the Hulk, so that version of the Hulk is something that I was actually familiar with earlier on. So like I'm saying, that banner portrayal, harkened back to that, made some sense to us. But I just for some reason, and maybe this is comic accurate, a little bit more of like a kind of just a simpler minded Bruce Banner. I don't know. But, again, it's like Bruce Banner himself is helpless. Like, Bruce Banner wasn't helpless beforehand. He just wasn't the Hulk. He was just a normal guy. And, Bruce Banner himself wasn't like, well, since I'm the Hulk now, I need to go out and, like, train MMA when I'm not the Hulk. So that way when I'm just saying, like, the Bruce Banner person. Like, Bruce Banner is not like a black belt in MMA. Like, obviously he's more, he's a pacifist. But, he's not helpless. Obviously he can be a pacifist and not be helpless. But again, he's just more like, I'm not gonna just go out and pursue, this, beating up criminals outside or beating up other people. Obviously, because he's a little more uncontrolled as the Hawk, as the Hawk, as the Hulk. But uncontrolled as the Hawk, as the Doc, Brian Dawkins. But for again, obviously, like we're saying, he's not like gets to pursue a criminal with a file when he's the Hulk, but he doesn't pursue that when he's Bruce Banner as well too. So but again, like he doesn't just need to be like hiding under a bush in Infinity War. Like that's a funny moment. Like he's like again like trying to like get the Hulk to pop out. Like I don't know, maybe some ED jokes there. I don't know. It's like oh some trauma stuff going on there. The Hulk won't emerge. But again, we don't need him to be like cowering in every corner and stuff. And I guess he's not necessarily like doing this here. And on the other side of this, we do have to compliment Ruffalo. I'm just we're just giving him a hard time. Ruffalo, call in, buddy. We're just pulling your leg, pause. But we're trying to hold him to a good standard as well too, because he has he was a guy with some expectations. That's for sure. I don't know if Mark Ruffalo goes as like a number 1 overall pick, but I think Ruffalo is definitely like a top 4 pick for sure. Maybe like a like a Evan Mobley type or something. And maybe that is a good comparison where it's like Ruffalo has been on some all defensive teams and maybe even won like a defensive player of the year, but there is just an extra level for Ruffalo to get to. And again, even like Crime 101 and stuff, like I think Ruffalo can lead a couple things, hot take, but I just again, I just think there's another, there's a run for Ruffalo that we haven't gotten yet that I think we will get again. And again, it wouldn't be fair to call it like a Ruffalo resurgence, but maybe in the way that like Brolin had a moment, here where it's like, okay, Brolin's just gonna be supporting and everything. Like, and Ruffalo could do a lot of the stuff that Brolin could do. I know that Brolin, in some of his roles maybe is like specifically, going for a more rugged situation. Like obviously, Brolin gives you that tough guy energy that maybe, again, you don't necessarily get the same way with Ruffalo, even though Ruffalo again can play like, we're saying, he can still give you that, like saying handle himself energy, but he's not aggressively tough guy the way that Brolin is. But still, like if Ruffalo was in No Country for Old Men, or if Ruffalo was even Thanos, obviously it's a little bit different. But there's another one I was thinking of as well too. I guess Sicario. Like again, Ruffalo could do those roles. It is a little bit different. Again, like the presence that Brolin has, and that is kind of specifically Josh Brolin, and it really does work for that character as well too. Just the confidence that he has strolling around in those different zones, obviously contrasting with what Emily Blunt is having. But and maybe again Ruffalo, Ruffalo's got to be the Emily Blunt. Maybe Ruffalo as the Emily Blunt character, but again, I think he could do some of that stuff as well to be that level. He could definitely be the guy in Weapons that was just here is now too. But again, it's like, where are those movies in Ruffalo's filmography? I'm not even criticizing the Yorgos movie. I'm just saying, again, the obviously just maybe the aggressive paycheck taking. I don't even know what it is. But there was just a moment when they were in the campus walking around, and I'm like, is Tom Holland? Again, I'm still trying to figure out, like we're saying, some of this stuff is still, trying to figure out, like we're saying, Destin Daniel Cretton as a filmmaker outside of the MCU, Tom Holland as an actor outside of the MCU. Like, how good of an actor is he? Just, again, that's just, seeing, and outside of the MCU is just, again, like seeing how many different roles and different things you can attack as an actor versus, again, we know that, he's very, very great in this role. So it's just a curiosity that I have more so than like a doubt that I'm throwing out there. But, again, to strengthen that question that I have, I'm watching him on screen with Ruffalo there, and I'm not thinking like, Ruffalo's blowing him away as an actor. Again, I'm not saying Ruffalo's having bad scenes. Well, I guess what was I saying earlier? But, again, Tom Holland being on Ruffalo's level now, but, you could say that I guess Ruffalo maybe was a comp as well. We were comping him to Cruise. I guess Ruffalo could be a comp in some ways. But, shout out to Ruffalo's Hulk. It was good to see him. And the Hulk as just a character in this as well, too. Some of the best Hulk that we've gotten since, of course, even Infinity War. The Infinity War stuff maybe is still the best Hulk because, the choreography, like there is legit fight choreography between him and Thanos, and that is what is unique for that Hulk fight. Like, we never really, again, in the MCU, for some reason, we never get to see the Hulk out. We got Avengers, and maybe that is good as well, too, the limitedness of it. Like, but it's just crazy that it's been, almost a decade. Like, how do we go? Can we go once every 10 years and get one good Hulk fight? Like, that seems a little aggressive. Can we make that once every 5, maybe? I don't know. But, again, we don't really get him being out that much, the Mark Ruffalo Hulk. I guess, and Ragnarok as well, too. I'm leaving Ragnarok off. But, he gets nerfed in Ragnarok as well. But then I guess, no, he pops back out at the end as well, too. He's, like, fighting the wolf and stuff in that. But either way, he's still, like, Hulk smash fighting. Even in the arena, of course, that's the whole point. He's the Hulk. He's bigger than everybody else. He's just going to go in and Hulk smash and beat everybody up. But when he fought Thanos, he was like legitimately fighting, of course, somebody his own size. And there's a moment there where, again, they're like legitimately sparring like it's Ali Frazier in the ring. And this actually reminds me as well, too. I should have mentioned this at the top. But I thought there was a moment at work today where I was going to have to defend Muhammad Ali's honor. I was like, what is happening here? I was like, this is like the one honor that you just assume everybody knows what's going on. Rest in peace to the legend. It's because these two guys walked in and they were, not to just like eavesdrop on their conversation, but, they were having it and, right there in front of us at work, and we were taking them over to their seat. And I don't even remember exactly what the conversation was, but when they had walked in, when they had walked in, the one guy initially had said, Ali wasn't that big, or he said Ali wasn't that good. He was just big and strong. And I was like, wait a second, what is he talking about? But I was like, this has got to be a different conversation. So I was like, I'm of course not going to just immediately address it. I was like, we'll just, have the normal restaurant banter and get them to their seat. But then as they're walking to their seat, the other guy goes, so Joe and Ali are kind of in the same weight class, but Ali's not on his level. And the guy goes, yeah. So that's when I turned back and I said, wait a second, you said Muhammad Ali's not that good? He's just big and strong? And he was like, no, it's a different thing. I think they were talking about a work thing. Or he just lied in the moment to get out of it. But I legitimately have no idea. We might have to go to the chat GPT for that one. Be like, what work situation could he be talking about where two people are in the same weight? I guess maybe they have their own boxing ring and it's just, the guys have the same names. Who's to say? But I was like, there's no way that this guy believes that Ali. I was like, how do you believe that? I was like, was Ali even big? Like, I think he was he even a little lighter? I'm not even sure. I guess, shows you how much we even know about the specifics of his career. Obviously, it's just more the highlights and the, the names and the big moments more so than, again, like the technical specificities. That's the word. The technical specificities of it. And there might be, again, some fighters that you would say. I know that there are, some people that would have, certain boxers ranked over Ali. I don't know if you would, as a non-boxing person, I don't know if I would make that choice. I think Ali would just be my default number one boxer. And I think that shows you the level that he is at, that I think that would be the case for most people, that he would be the default number one boxer as well, too. So he kind of is, again, in the same way that, maybe even more so for any sport. Like Ali is just boxing. in some ways. But I was like, there's no way that there's just no way you think that. Like, there's no, I don't think there's any equivalent take in sports in some ways. Because again, you wouldn't say like, oh, Jordan was just, Jordan just, I guess maybe that's what you would just say, like Michael Jordan jumped over guys. Like, oh, Jordan couldn't really play basketball. He just jumped over guys. And you'd be like, but did you see him? Like, did you see a mid-range jumper at all? Like, did you not see him play defense? Like, I guess, maybe not, but you just only watch layup highlights. But Shaq's the obvious comparison there. It'd be like saying, Shaq wasn't good at basketball. Shaq's only big. It's like, Sean Bradley was also big. He didn't have the same number Shaq did. Shaq's pretty good. So it's like, I don't know what conversation that they were having where the two sentences back to back outside of boxing where you go, Ali wasn't that good. He was just big and strong. And then the other guy goes, Joe and Ali are in the same weight class, but Ali's not at his level. And again, I'd have to even go back and look at the full history of Ali versus Frazier. I don't know the records for those fights right off the top of my head. I'm assuming they each won one, but I don't know who has the winning record in the series, and maybe it was just 1-1. But, I know one thing for a fact. Ali was, more than just, he was not, I guess I don't even know the right way to grammatically say it now, but I know that guy was wrong. Hey, I know that guy was wrong. Is essentially, what I'm saying. But either way, we haven't even gotten to Florence Pugh in the hot tub yet. And we're running out of time, chat. Maybe it's a good thing, we save objectifying to the end. But we didn't make the movie. Hey, yo. And obviously, they sort of, make an excuse for it. It's a tactical choice for Yelena Belova in this one. She has to, of course, have the secrecy, ripped away from the people when they approach her, make sure that there is no weapons on everybody. Of course, if you're really spitting game, of course, you can make a joke about how it's impossible to really take all the weapons off of you and, see where that goes. Obviously, Yelena was making some comments as well, too. So I think if Tom Holland, again, if Tom Holland was getting rebounds in this movie, Yelena would have been there for him. And I'm going to have to go back and, rewatch some of the other scenes that Florence Pugh had in the other Marvel movies as the Black Widow character, but her accent in this was thick. I mean, hey, yo, Chad, clip the thick part and, take it out of context, but we're talking about the accent. Hey, yo. I mean, she was really going for it here. And they kept, of course, having her say potatoes over and over again. It was a funny joke. There was some of the screenwriting stuff in this, not to get like, oh, Rem's over here breaking down the screenwriting, but I mean that was funny as well too. Again, do you need the potatoes joke? Like, do you need the line in the scene like 7 times? You could probably rephrase it a couple different ways, but initially, of course, dealing with big potatoes, dealing with small potatoes, it does work. And obviously, I think the joke is more the accent though. Again, it's almost like she's like borderline Arnold in these movies. She's borderline telling Peter Parker like, get to the child. You need, like, she's like, how do I find the demon that's hopping from these villains? She's like, you need to get to the chopper. Get to the chopper. She's like, I think they almost did like the Carl Weathers handshake when she got in there. She's like, oh, Peter Parker, you son of a bitch. It's like she really got, I guess, small potato, big potato. I almost like borderline Latin America as well too. It was really getting crazy. But shout out for the commitment to the character as well too. It was almost to the point where I was like, is she joking? Like, is Florence Pugh, because there is that in Spider-Man has had this as well too, but there is like, Thor cameos in Doctor Strange. You'll have like just these random 1-minute cameos in the MCU just to be like, okay, you know what, these other superheroes do exist. And I guess also does, show that Yelena's office is in New York City as well too, in a Russian bathhouse. So we did just have the Rush Hour 2 rewatch, I would just call it rewatchable branding. Hey, I don't want to get sued, but we almost had the Rush Hour 2 anniversary rewatch, wink, 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 on Sunday. And obviously there's a iconic sort of parlor scene there, parlor fight. I guess again, not a fight here, but just the idea of a bathhouse or a massage situation in an action movie, it does seem like it does really work. I don't know if this is the one that Robert Kraft was caught in as well. Is there a picture of Yelena Belova like infiltrating the Robert Kraft bathhouse? Maybe she was the one, honestly. That's why he got caught. She's like, I need this for my office. Get out of here. And turns out he's like, wait a second, they're taking pictures. I'm gonna get exposed. She's like, that's the whole point. But yeah, whoever thought of this as a tactic is definitely probably needs a little bit of a raise. That is for sure. We're like, put Florence Pugh in a hot tub and call it tactical. But also probably probably now the best hot tub cameo since Margot Robbie in Wolf of Wall Street as well too. I don't know what the full list of hot tub cameos is, but Florence Pugh is definitely on there. She does, of course, when it is for meetings as well too. I guess they do have something set up because again, she is obviously in the pool prepared as well. I don't know what the chlorine situation is in this pool as well. It definitely has to be some type of dye. Maybe they need to, ask her about the dye situation. It seems like she's got her blue dialed in here. But, it also definitely, again, does double duty. Because do we speak from experience? But let's just say that this attire in a typical pool, usually, again, the movie would be rated a little bit differently. But the water is foggy enough that it does, obviously, make a nice PG-13 situation here. But again, they do have something set up because when he FaceTimes her later, she's not in the hot tub. Obviously, she's up on the bench. Now, now maybe there would be a place where she could actually have an office in the bathhouse here, but it doesn't seem like there's much of a building. It does seem like really it is just the tub and the bench. So, she's just literally hanging out there. The steam would be interesting. And again, you couldn't sit in the hot tub all day, obviously. Maybe, she'd build her immunity after a while, and she really just could. But, yeah, what a scene. Honestly, maybe a top 10 MCU scene that we've ever gotten at this point. And this does also have the joke in it about the 10 Mysterios, which is maybe sneakily the craziest joke that we've ever gotten in a Marvel movie. Like, have we ever had a gangbang reference in a Marvel movie? Like, whoa, hey, yo, you're like, Rem, what are you saying there? I didn't write the script. Florence Pugh's the one that said 10 Mysterios. What were they doing? Was it a game of 21? 10 Mysterios in a Spider-Man. Spider-Man's reffing a 10 on, a 5-on-5 Mysterio game. I don't think that's what it was, So, and, again, obviously, I think she literally alludes to it as well, too. But, yeah, again, that was a moment where I was like, maybe I'm an old man now. Maybe I'm officially like an unk. I'm like, can we have jokes about gangbangs in a Spider-Man movie? And it was one of those things where the theater definitely did laugh, but there was, of course, I'm trying to think if the theater ever had like a laugh out loud moment. It was just more like a, like a whoa, that type of thing. Like, oh, did they really just say somebody was, Spider-Man's getting cleaned out by Ted Mysterio? Like, whoa, I didn't know we were having that. But I guess it's it's tastefully done, I guess, in this movie that they mentioned that. So I don't even know what else they mentioned for the graphic fan art as well too. I guess anytime there is going to be, like we're saying, I guess male interaction, there's going to be a section of fan art that's probably going to, trend a certain way. I don't know if, we're, getting a little controversial here. It is getting late, but, again, I'm just guessing as well too. Like, I'm just guessing we would know, but I'm trying to think because there was a pod I was listening to and they went on a tangent about like I want to say it was Tony the Tiger. It was some, but it was some type of, cartoon mascot like that. And they were like, oh yeah, Tony the Tiger has this whole section of fans and stuff. And, I'm not trying to, say a thing. I'm just saying that, again, fan bases emerge for anything. So, I guess it's not surprising that a fan base would emerge around, a Mysterio Spider-Man situation as well too. I don't even know what but what's the modern day conspiracy now? As well, I guess it'd be something in politics that'd be nasty as well. But like, I don't know what the superhero correlation would be. It'd be like, oh, these two podcasters, like, oh, let's do fan art of Shane Gillis and Joe. I guess not superheroes, but you know what I'm saying, like famous personalities, like that aren't directly in politics. I guess is what I'm trying to think of there. Again, I guess either way, but not superheroes, but take a stand. But either way, we're getting late, Chad. We gotta get through this Spider-Man recap. Hey, yo, are we even halfway through the movie? We're at the bathtub scene. We didn't even get through Act 1 on this Spider-Man movie. But I mean, we've hit a lot of a lot of the major stuff as well. I mean, we did mention the ending earlier. I guess, do we have to mention more on the Jean Grey introduction? We did talk about, obviously they were, working that in and working a lot of different storylines. The three sort of distinct sections of the movies were, him transforming into a, more developed biological spider, him developing his relationships again with Ned and MJ, and then them, officially tracking down Jean Grey, which again, even for a longer movie, when you go back and, kind of go through those parts, obviously you can maybe just kind of skip through some of the initial stuff if you want and just, kind of get to the transformation and then him into the relationships and into the rest of the movie. Or, again, you do have those three distinct parts looking at it where you're like, okay, this is the transformation section of the movie, this is that section of the movie, this is the other section of the movie as well too. I guess, we haven't really touched on the guy from the damage control, Tremel Tillman, like we were saying earlier. I am glad that, in some ways, that he was a villain by the end of the movie. Hey, yo, what does that mean? Because when they first introduced him, he was like so over the top, what do you say, like stereotype with the way that he was introducing the building there. Like there is a way that a tour guide, we'll get to this point eventually, Chad. Again, it's getting late, I'm afraid. There is a way that a businessman will tour of, like, I how many businessman tours have we done, but in interacting with people at the restaurant, there is a way that business people will describe their workings that is, it's just filled with so much BS that you're just like, this is ridiculous. I just want to get out of here. Like, and this is to Tillman's acting as well too. That again, he's planting these seeds as like, oh, you're like, this guy is, like, this guy is, this guy's a bad guy. And I think there is a good track record of, they introduce, if a guy is running a government program at the beginning of an NCU movie, there is a good chance that he will probably not be running that government program, and he was probably corruptly doing it. By the end of it, obviously it's a long list of actors that you really want to be in the list now. Tremel, Robert Redford, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So, I guess to some degree Nick Fury, though again, more a good guy, but I guess he was kind of running Project Overlook there. Is that what the Robert Redford one was, I guess? And then Gary Shandling? Hey, speaking of sneaky politicians, Gary Shandling's right up there with all of them. But again, there is that track record, so you just kind of know. It's like, okay, this department's probably up to no good. They're gonna have to reframe it. But when he gave the speech where it's like, he does like the juvenile reformation, like, oh, the hand, they're just youth off the street that just need a little direction. Blah. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know Spider-Man was getting this, on the nose with some of the stuff they're doing here. I'm, and again, they do have the hand as like sneaky, like, maybe they aren't totally reformed. Again, maybe the point is they just kind of do this guy's bidding more so than they're like, again, like, now they're pure of heart. But again, it was like, I'm kind of glad they brought that stuff back around, because like that would have been almost a little too cringe if that would have been, real life, where he's like, oh, I guess, obviously there is like Medser is this guy's name. There is like, obviously the seeds of, I guess, a good heart behind that, maybe, but again, with the way that he's phrasing some of this stuff, and it's like, the smugness of which he's approached and all of it, and again, he obviously, the overall conversation between him and Spider-Man, you're like, I guess it's a movie, how much detail are they gonna get? It's gonna be generic, oh, we need you need me, but it's like they really discuss nothing here as well too. So like, he's clearly, up to no good. You do have, I will say too about, hey, we have to address VMAX now. Okay, we're not PG-13 anymore. It is a little, again, speaking of, maybe out there jokes, a little weird to, have somebody running around asking for VMAX the whole time. But I did kind of like the idea of, the red herring storytelling element there, because again, as a non-comic book fan, and I don't know if this was for, all non-comic book fans, but as a non-comic book fan, I wasn't like locked in as to like, oh, that would definitely not be something from the comics. It's like, oh, I've never heard of VMAX reading through the comics. What could that be? Or, some type of other thing. I guess they did have Vulture, of course, in the first Spider-Man. So, was it as like Vulture Max technology or something like that? New Vulture suit, a new, the Sinister Six program that they're trying to unleash. I don't know if there's something in that's like Vulture was, working up with this superhero or whatever. But, it was a good, different storytelling device as well in the movies that, again, kind of threw you off, that we haven't had in Marvel. And I feel like, again, hey, we're running out of time here. It is what it is. But we do also have to maybe continue to address maybe something we said earlier about the just the relationship scenes between Holland and Zendaya, because those were really gripping as well too. And again, their acting in those scenes was phenomenal. And even though the writing, like we're saying with the screenwriting was maybe a little heavy-handed at times, especially some of the messaging later on about like, the monster, like, oh, you gotta contain the monster, pause. But it was like there was one point where Zendaya, he's like he's building the chip, and she looks at the screen and she's like, this is the type of thing you would put on a monster. And it's like, oh, Spider-Man really is my, again, it's like, there is like a little like that. I almost felt like I was watching like a Frankenstein movie from the 50s. It's like, you got to really contain the monster and so, whatever. But again, for a kids movie, you get the messaging out there a little simpler. Again, I get it. It does work. A sophisticated adult like myself can just read through it right away. It is what it is. But, again, it was a little heavy-handed there for a second. And, again, some of the relationship stuff was, but that was the best written stuff of the movie for sure. And, again, in a way, like, I guess maybe relationship tragedy is not new to the MCU. Like I think about it now. Again, you do have the arc of Doctor Strange and Rachel McAdams. They do kind of have the will they won't that like they can't be together at the end of the day situation. You do also have, again, Captain America and Peggy Carter at the end of the first movie. Obviously that leaves off a little bit differently, and then he doubles back and cheats on the niece with her. But that makes it a little more complicated. But again, that one doesn't necessarily like end great. I guess Iron Man, it does. Obviously, it ends. Spoiler for Iron Man if you haven't seen it. It does end with Iron Man, obviously, at the end of his career there for the superheroes. Dying off when they finally settle down and have happy, and they have have happy. They get happy. What does that mean? But just emotionally, and then they have a kid and stuff. And then they kill him off right at that point. So again, like we're saying, relationship tragedy is not new, but just the angle of them, addressing it with the memory wipes, and then obviously just them being really upfront and real about them in the screenwriting and how that translated into the conversation. It's just a real gut punch, and you're like, yeah, that is how that conversation would go. She's like, what do you want me to do? I got no memories of you, bud. Like, I can't, I can't summon those. I guess, as we see now, of course, and as we assume over the next 3 movies, the connection of them being in their lives, they'll make new ones and they'll get back to that place, of course, as they will. Obviously that, again, goes back to what we were saying earlier, the power of the boy friendship, the male friendship there, like, one dap up and, years of memories, just straight return. It is what it's, that's the meme I was seeing online was like, oh, one handshake with Ned and all the memories are returned, but you can make out with, MJ on top of the roof, and apparently that's not enough. So, again, obviously shout out to Ned. He's locked in. It is what it is. But, again, for the writing there, that was incredible stuff. And that scene in the Punisher house was, again, some of the best Spider-Man scenes that we got. And I guess even for Spider-Man specifically, again, spoiler for the Amazing Spider-Man, obviously that ends with Gwen Stacy, that one has a little tragedy itself. But ultimately the heartfeltness of the relationships being strengthened, because it was, obviously he connected with friends there at the end of the day, and that was what was important for that version of the story. I mean, there's so much more we could even mention as well too. I mean, we got Ned going Lucius, going what do you say, not Lucius Fox, but going the Dark Knight on everybody, and tracking the whole city. He's like, look at Lucius Fox, I've rigged the whole city with the Spidey tracker. And then Lucius Fox, like, very disappointed in Ned, I guess, and then he maybe walks out. He's like, okay, Ned, I will help you find Spider-Man, but at the end of this, I won't help you. It looked like the Punisher was maybe living in the what do you say, the facility that the Amazing Spider-Man was doing like the initial skateboard scene in. They looked like there was kind of some similarity there, but maybe it's a little different. I don't know, but again, hey, it might be a part 2 situation, on Friday. We'll just have to see. But we have to take off for the night. We do have to get up in the morning. It is what it is. So we have to take off here. So we will be back, like I said, for the Friday night live stream. Sunday, Tuesday, Friday is the typical schedule here on the Rib and Sam pod. So stay tuned to the YouTube for that, and for when we have to show up to be in line with a event that maybe would be worth popping out for as well too. So the YouTube, you can catch us when we go live. You can follow us on the podcast feeds, and you can keep us messaged up on the Instagram as well too at REMINGTOM Pod over there. Of course, Sam was just on the live stream a couple days ago, so you can check out that episode as well too. You can support their coffee shop endeavor as well too. I mean, they're, a great story as that is continuing to develop, and we're tracking the progress of that as well too. That's just a great thing that they're definitely working on right now. And like we're saying, you really see the different pieces of that starting to form together. And I know, again, they were obviously just bits and pieces of the information that we're getting over here. But again, just the the two different live streams that we were talking to them. And one, it's like, here's the idea, and then the next one, this last one that we're talking to, it's like, here are the here's the building, here's the thing, here's the different, here are all these different steps that we've taken to get this thing in place, and it really becoming them really manifestation of it really becoming a manifestation. We can't even talk anymore, Chad. It's time for bed. Hey, yo. It is what it is. We gotta go. Shout out to Sam and Nia with their coffee shop, and shout out to Spider-Man. They did a great job. We'll see y'all Friday. Peace.